It being 3 o'clock, I'm going to call to order the County of Placer Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, November 14th, 2017 at 3 p.m. We will begin today with the flag salute led by me. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you all for that. We will move now to our consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval by the County Executive Department. All items will be approved by a single roll call vote, although anyone may ask to address consent items prior to the board taking action, and that item may be moved for discussion. Is there any member of the board that would like to pull an item off consent? Is there any member of the public that would like to pull an item off consent, either here or in Tahoe? And if you look behind you, you can see our beautiful offices in Lake Tahoe. You can't see the lake, though, but they are waving. All right, seeing no one wanting anything pulled from consent, what's the pleasure of the board? All right, this is a roll call vote. Yes. Thank you very much. We will now move to public comment. This is the time at which anyone may address the board on items not on today's agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person, since the time allocated for public comment is 15 minutes. If all comments cannot be heard within the 15-minute time limit, public comment will be taken up again at the end of the regular session. And please understand that the board is not permitted to take any action on items addressed under public comment. Is there anyone let's start in Tahoe. Is there anyone in Tahoe who would like to make public comment? I see none. Then we will come here to Auburn. If you would come to the microphone, please, and give us your name and your address.
Okay. My name is Susan Kern. And first, I'd like to present some documents to be admitted in today's minutes, if I could.
Okay. And is this regarding something that is on today's agenda? No, okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here today asking for justice for the dogs that have been abused and those continuing to be abused in a local puppy mill headquartered here in Auburn, and it has been for 20 plus years. They also operate in other parts of California and the country. Last December 2016, 57 dogs were confiscated from this puppy mill by the Humane Society of the Sierra Foothills and accompanied by a local veterinarian and 2 police officers. They found the dogs in very inhumane circumstances, as the documents I've provided describe. Time constraints don't allow me to go into the details on all these poor conditions. I hope you can find the time to read these. The DA has denied prosecution due to the testimony of Dr. Sheriff, who is the longtime vet of the puppy mill operators, which presents a big conflict of interest to me, I would think. The testimony of the vet who was actually involved in the confiscation seems to have been ignored and not considered in the denial by the DA. I'd like to request perhaps that the grand jury investigate this matter further, independent of the DA. The puppy mill owners also misrepresent their dogs as being registered to the AKA, but as some purchasers of these dogs have found out, their dogs were not registered, as their parentage was not pure or registered with the organization. This is after these dog owners paid $1,800 for supposedly a purebred dog. I'm sure the members of this board don't want to allow such egregious animal abuse and fraudulent practices to continue in their county. And thank you for allowing me to speak for these abused dogs that can't speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment at this time? Please come forward, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jensen Schneider, and I'm a resident of Placer County. I'm a medical marijuana patient and an organic vegetable farmer. I use medical marijuana to combat seizures and pain due to herniated discs from a severe car accident. I'm addressing the board about a stance that has been taken regarding medical marijuana. Since the board of directors has adopted the policy for personal use grows of no more than 6 plants per residence, not per patient, with other restrictions based on setbacks and such, and others indoor grows more based on setbacks. More patients than ever are having to go outside legal means to obtain their medicine. Most patients cannot reach setbacks for outdoor growing, or cannot afford to grow indoors due to space or power and equipment limitations. It has been made illegal to grow for others as a caregiver for others under the county law. All that has been done is the rise of the black market once again. The only people in our county making money now from marijuana are the people that never cared about following the law or never did. There's still the same people growing hundreds or even thousands of plants, and they're selling to everybody and anybody and everybody, some even to the youth. For medical patients as well as other law-abiding citizens, this is horrible. Medical patients for medical patients as well as other law-abiding citizens, this is horrible. Medical patients who cannot grow for whatever reason and were unable to have a caregiver operating in a zone where setbacks and laws can be met are now having to pay higher prices than ever operating on the black market. According to your own surveys, maintaining the ban and allowing for personal cultivation only, 100% of the participants believed that safe access would not be met. This is an example that safe access has not been met. There's people in our county growing hundreds and thousands of plants operating on the black market, no guidelines for what can be sent to children or not. And I would be willing to serve on a committee to come up with guidelines for it. I am very familiar with state law and county law. I'm aware of the county's previous committee and the polls that they did. And, I don't understand looking at these polls how if this amount of our public that took the surveys.
I'm sorry, sir, if you could wrap up your comments.
Okay, if this amount of people that took the surveys are saying that what you guys are doing and have done is not achieving safe access to medical patients and the public, why we're not taking a different direction and coming up with guidelines.
Understood, and I would suggest you keep an eye on the town of Colfax. It looks like
I know they're operating outside county.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not wanting to operate outside the law.
Thank you. Any other comment? Please come forward, identify yourself.
My name is Erica Eder. I'm here today to speak about my adopted dog, Sully. Sully is one of the 57 Havanese dogs that were rescued from the puppy mill in Auburn that Ms. Kern spoke about. I've seen firsthand what the deplorable living conditions he was confined to have done to him. He has suffered medical issues, socialization issues, and psychological issues. Some of the specific problems were rotting teeth, gum concerns, and extreme tartar. He had to have many teeth pulled after being rescued and goes tomorrow to get them cleaned and possibly more pulled. He was debarked, has digestion problems, eye problems, skin problems, and was underweight. Emotionally, he is very skittish, fearful, timid, untrusting, and afraid of everything, especially men. He is constantly on guard. He cowers or runs away when you approach him or go to pet him. When he does let you pet him, he freezes, and you can see the fear on his face. I doubt he has ever had any loving human touch. Sully didn't know what grass was, what a toy was, never used stairs, was confused at doorways. He didn't know how to be on a leash. When first trying to walk him on a leash, he could only go a short distance before stopping. He had no muscle tissue from living his entire life in a cramped cage. Vets guess he's 5 years old. Although Sully is improving in many areas, he'll never be the dog he could have been.
It's okay. Take your time. Take a deep breath.
He'll never be the dog he could have been had he been raised in a healthy environment from the start. He struggles every day with complications of living in the terrible environment that he did. He will most likely suffer from the inhumane treatment he received from these abusers for the rest of his life. We want the board to know that we are in full support of Ms. Kern's statement, and we want these animal abusers to answer for their cruel and inhumane treatment of these innocent dogs. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from the district attorney's office today that these ladies could speak with? Okay, I don't see anyone. Just informationally, we have an independent elected district attorney. We don't actually have any jurisdiction over him. I'm sure we can all communicate your concerns to him, but we're a little bit constricted in what we can do as well.
I'm Victoria Connolly. I'm going to speak very briefly because I know other people want to speak in this 15-minute frame. But I just wanted to say that about the puppy mill situation, that after reading the Bjork versus Placer County District Attorney case, which is currently in the U.S. District Court alleging sex and age discrimination at the DA's office, it makes me really wonder about the overall judgment that goes on in the DA's office, particularly regarding this matter, and particularly as it involves Humane Society of the Sierra Foothills, with which several people in the county have had issues previously. So I just wanted to bring that matter to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Please come forward. And if you want to engage in public comment, feel free to line up so I don't have to keep calling on folks.
I do want to respond, and Victoria, I do appreciate your concern here, but in a complaint, you can write whatever you want as allegations, whether they're true or not. Okay? So I just want to remind you that that's exactly what people can do. All right? It's a complaint.
Please go ahead.
My name is Susan Gadd, and I came here today to be a voice for the dog I adopted from the Humane Society. I call her Julie. I don't think she had a name or even a number before. Now, when Julie was first placed in foster, the foster mom took her to see Dr. Linda Nickens because she was sick. And Dr. Nickens said, yes, she's pregnant, but she's very sick. She's underweight. She did blood work on her, and she said her blood work and the urine was off. She was anemic. She had been debarked. She had a misplaced kneecap, which was sitting on the side of her leg. And this is the way she had lived in this filthy cage for I don't know how long. They don't even know how old she is because they don't have, and you didn't get any papers. They said they had medical care, but there's no records of medical care until Linda Nickens started treating Julie. So she did extensive surgery in her mouth. She pulled 10 teeth, did 3 root extractions, and cleaned up all the infection. She had to stay on this. The infection was spreading through her body. So by the time I got her and I took her to my vet, she said she had a stage 1 heart murmur. from the infection being in her body for so long. This doesn't even touch the emotional damage these dogs have gone through. My Julie is afraid of men. She's afraid of loud noises. Whoops.
You have another minute.
And she's fearful of everything. And everything has to come very slow and measured. She's also afraid of hands. And I've never seen anything like this. I've had dogs since I was 3 years old, and I have never seen anything so painful and so concerning. You know, I have to add this. I believe that you can judge the character of a person by how they treat their animals. I also believe a country and a county can be judged this way too. These dogs existed in a torturous living environment with no care, inadequate food. Their water that they had, was filled with feces. Please use your influence to help us make life better for the dogs.
Thank you. Anyone else, please come forward. Feel free to line up so that you can just keep cycling through so we can get to as many people as possible as quickly as possible.
Shauna Larson, Larsen. My printer wasn't working. My family moved to Auburn in 2000. I'm also speaking to the Havanese case. We live off 49 along the Bear River. In 2005, we built a foster kennel for rescued dogs. Since then, we've several thousand sets of paws have been placed in adopting homes after a stay with us. We partner with over a dozen animal welfare organizations in Northern California, including Placer County Animal Services and Humane Society of the Sierra Foothills. On December 9th, 2016, I assisted with transporting and fostering these Havanese dogs. At our kennel, we have the capacity to isolate dogs as needed and provide appropriate space for moms and their babies. A total of 49 of the Havanese dogs from the puppy mill were transported and cared for at our rescue foster kennel, including 7 nursing families, plus additional sets of puppies and adults. In my opinion, more than 1 litter of puppies at once is ridiculous. It was immediately apparent that there was a history of inadequate care of the dogs. The adults had rotting teeth and nails that were spiraling into their foot pads and legs. All of the dogs were filthy. At the puppy mill site, we found feces and food scattered throughout the family pens. Adult dogs were crowded in suspended wire crates. Water bowls were dirty and/or empty. I was appalled. I have not been involved in the legal proceedings, but understand that it is possible that District Attorney Owens may not have received adequate, conclusive evidence to proceed. I can attest to the care and efforts of the Humane Society of the Sierra Foothills. The organization stepped up to assist foster volunteers like us with support including husbandry and medical needs of the dogs. I tell this story with hope that the Placer County Board of Supervisors will consider encouraging further investigation of the Havanese puppy mill case by District Attorney Owens. I believe this action may result in preventing a repeat of my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna.
Hi, my name is Alina Miller, and actually I'm just here I wasn't on the rescue with the Havanese dogs, but I have been on a few of the other rescues with the Humane Society, and I would just like to submit some photos, and if by any chance that you could or do have any influence, I would hope that you could encourage a little more punishment or something for these people that are being so cruel to these animals. The pictures that I would like to submit These people have not been prosecuted as well. And it's just heartbreaking to see this repeatedly happen over and over again, and these people just walk away. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. If you'd give those to the clerk of the board, she'll be certain to get them to us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Phyllis Villa, and I'm actually here to read someone else's statement. But I do have a dog from the puppy mill also, and she's just like Sully. The same conditions, the same things pertain to her as to Sully. This statement is from Renelle Markstein, and she could not be here today. Our dog was one of the mother dogs that was continuously bred. When they found her, she was in a cage with 4 males. When we received her, she could not stand at her feeding bowl without collapsing. Her legs were bowed. One leg is still deformed. She couldn't walk 50 feet without collapsing and gasping for air. I took her to our veterinarian, and she said that there was no muscle tissue in her and her lungs were underactive due to living in a cage her whole life. When we received our dog, when we received her, our dog had just been spayed and had all but 6 teeth removed due to gum disease. Her eyes were a mess. Her ears were being treated for severe ear infection. She has been to a veterinarian numerous times with vomiting and diarrhea. She was also extremely underweight. Trying to find the right food was an issue. Finally, a veterinarian ran tests to find she had irritable bowel syndrome, in which was caused by her eating her own stools. Roxy also has an eye condition, which she has been being treated for. She has a condition that causes her eyes to be permanently dilated. This is due to living in the dark. Roxy has gained a normal weight now and must be on prescription food for the rest of her life. I know my daughter also has one that she fostered, and she has no teeth. They all had to be pulled because they were infected, so the conditions were just deplorable.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment at this time? Okay, quick, come forward. This will be the last public comment for now, and then we can reopen it after the end of the meeting later if there is anyone else who would like to make public comment.
My name is Karen Brown. I live here in Auburn. I'm one of the volunteers up at the shelter. I just wanted to come in and talk a little bit about these dogs and the conditions that they were kept in, the number of puppies they had over a long period of time for nothing but profit. The dogs were not cared for properly. It took huge numbers of hours, volunteer hours, to take care of these dogs, to even get them back to health, to get them back to a place where they didn't have fungus in their toenails from being in cages in their own stool and waste. This is not proper treatment of animals. It is not something that we in California are getting behind anymore. We just passed the law with puppy mills not allowing their dogs to be put into pet stores. So I really would like to encourage everyone to stop and think about how we've treated animals in the past and how we're going to go forward with treating them. California is taking great steps, and I really hope that Placer County and Auburn are right in there doing the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, I'm going to close public comment at this time, and we will move to our next item on our agenda, which is our 3:15 timed item. This is the Community Development Resource Agency item relating to secondary dwelling unit housing zoning text amendments. And I will thank you all very much. I'll wait until everybody filters out so that we keep confusion to a minimum.
Thank you.
All right, Shauna, welcome.
Good afternoon. Shauna Purvines, Community Development Resources Agency, Planning Services. So this item was continued from October 3rd. On October 3rd, staff brought forward a proposed revision to the zoning ordinance related to secondary dwellings as a result of changes to state law. Following staff's presentation and public comment, the board discussed revising the owner occupancy section of the ordinance and asked staff to return with some more flexible language that allowed for the owner occupancy or long-term rental of either the primary or the secondary unit. The board also addressed a concern to not allow either or both units, the primary and secondary, to be used simultaneously as a short-term rental. So staff has prepared a few amendments. There were 3 sections that we needed to address. The first one was Section E. It is now just the occupancy requirements. We have added in a clarification on owner-occupied or rented on a long-term basis. We've also included a definition for long-term rental for clarity on this process. The second section that needed to be amended was because there is no longer a requirement for an owner occupancy. Section G was amended. However, we did retain the voluntary deed restriction for the affordability. So should a owner wish to still proceed with a reduction or waiver of fees, then they can do a voluntary deed restriction related to that. And the last section of the ordinance that was proposed for amending is to remove Section I, which related specifically to the short-term rental of secondary dwellings, because this has now been addressed in the Section E. So with that, those are the proposed changes. If this does meet the board's direction, then we would ask that the board find that the proposed ordinance is statutorily exempt from CEQA, and to adopt the ordinance as proposed in Attachment 1, and Attachment 1 has been revised to include these proposed revisions.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. This is a public hearing, but before I open the public hearing, I'll ask any members of the board if they have any questions or comments on this. I see none. Okay, I will open the public hearing. Is there any member of the public who would like to ask a question or make a comment on this item? If so, please come forward, identify yourself. Seeing none, I'm closing the public hearing. Oh, wait, we have one in Tahoe. I'm sorry, Tahoe, come on forward. I'm reopening the public hearing.
Are we good? There you go. All right. Good afternoon, Chair Montgomery, members of the board. My name is Pat Davison with the Contractors Association of Truckee, Tahoe. Thank you for this change, deleting the owner occupancy requirement from the second unit program outside the Tahoe Basin. This is a significant accomplishment, and we hope it produces more housing across the county. The only concern worthy of mentioning is the income-based deed restriction, which is imposed as a trade-off for fee exemption. A homeowner has a choice and does not have to use the fee exemption. As we stated during the adoption of the Tahoe Basin Area Plan, we are concerned that the income cap and long-term nature of the deed restriction may be a disincentive to a homeowner considering a second unit. So this also becomes a program feature we will be watching on an annual basis along with the second unit program at the lake. I'll end with a thank you to Shauna Purvines. She's a great listener and has been really good to work with. So with that, I urge your support of the code change deleting the owner occupancy requirement in the second unit program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, any other public comment before I close it again? Okay, closing public comment, and I'm bringing this back to the board. We have a motion, Holmes, a second, Duran. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, it not being 3:45 yet, we will move to our first department item. This is a Public Works and Facilities item. This is the Placer County Assessor's Office remodel plans and specifications. Rob Unholz presenting.
Good afternoon, Chair Montgomery, members of the board. Today we're asking that you approve plans and specs and authorize staff to solicit bids for the Assessor's remodel project located at 2986 Richardson Drive, Auburn. The estimated project cost is $426,000. The project is included in the 2017-18 Public Works and Facilities Capital Projects budget. The assessor has occupied the same space in the Finance Administration Building since 1999 when it was constructed. Their original existing lobby is located off the main second floor corridor about midway into the assessor's space. It includes multiple computer stations for the public and a large public transaction counter, but is not being utilized to its fullest capacity. This project will modify the existing second floor public lobby to create a new large conference room not currently available in the building. The assessor's lobby will be moved closer to the main second floor lobby for increased convenience to the public and provide a safer and more secure area for public counter staff. The project will include two public computer workstations in the new lobby. The assessor's first floor space will be modified to accommodate the need for additional private offices and a systems furniture reconfiguration to accommodate additional staff. In order to proceed, it's requested that your board approve plans and specs and authorize staff to solicit bids. The estimated total project cost is $851,066, including $426,000 for construction and $425,066 for systems furniture, design, project management, force account, and contingencies. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from any member of the board? I see none. Any questions or comments from any member of the public on this item, either here or in Tahoe? I see none. All right, I'll bring it back to the board. We have a motion, Euler, that sounded like. Second, Wygant. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, let's move to item 4B. SB 844, medium security housing and vocational training at the South Placer Adult Correctional Facility.
And this item is requesting your approval and the execution of a consultant services agreement with Banner Construction Management in an amount not to exceed $686,517 to assist in the preparation of pre-construction requirements for SB 844, medium security housing vocational training at the South Placer Adult Correctional Facility, and approve a budget revision in the Department of Public Works and Facilities 17-18 final budget to increase SB 844 capital, the SB 844 capital project by $500,000 for a total of $1 million for the year necessary to fund the first year of this project and funded by capital facility impact fees. On June 8th, the Board of State and Community Corrections awarded the county a conditional award of $30 million in state lease revenue bond financing. This funding will be utilized for the design and construction of medium security housing and vocational training for inmates at South Placer Correctional Facility. The proposed facility is approximately 38,500 square feet with 60 beds of female minimum security and 60 beds of male reentry inmates, day rooms, bathrooms, officer stations, visitation, staff space, classrooms, and shop space. In order to secure the funding, the county must conduct several pre-construction requirements, including project establishment, real estate due diligence, establish the performance criteria for state BSCC and state fire marshal approval, space programming for the design build request for proposals, and design and performance criteria. Vanner has provided similar services for SB 863, successfully assisting the county in navigating through the process. Upon BSCC and Department of Finance approval and subsequent Board of Supervisors approval, staff anticipates entering into a design build contract in early 2019, with construction beginning in late 2019. In order to proceed, staff requests that your board approve the attached consultant services agreement with Banner Construction Management. The total estimated project cost is $33 million, including this contract. The requested budget revision increases appropriations in the amount of $500,000 to $1 million for this year, and those funds are from the capital facility impact fees. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions from any member of the board? I see none. Any members of the public have any questions or comments on this item? I see none. I will bring this back to the board. This is a budget revision, so this will require a roll call. Is that correct? Okay. We have a motion, Euler, a second, Holmes. Roll call, please. Yes. Thank you very much. We will move to item C.
And we are back with another award of bids for the job order contracting program, this time for North Star Construction and Engineering and Federal Solutions Group, the two lowest and responsible and responsive bidders for job order contracting in an amount not to exceed $1 million per contract for a 12-month period from the date of their first notice to proceed issued under each contract, and authorize the Director of Public Works and Facilities or designee to execute contracts subject to County Council and Risk Management concurrence, sign job orders up to $250,000, and approve any supplemental job orders consistent with the County Purchasing Manual and Section 20142 of the Public Contract Code. Your board approved plans and specs and authorized solicitation of bids for this bid on September 5th, 2017. Bid solicitations were advertised in accordance with the Public Contract Code. 15 building and bid exchanges were notified of the bid solicitation, and bid documents were reviewed by 86 trade contractors on public purchase. Bids were opened on September 28th by Procurement Services. The two apparent responsive and responsible low bidders are North Star Construction and Engineering in Yuba City and Federal Solutions Group located in San Ramon. As you may remember, these are for indefinite quantity contracts for a variety of projects, specific construction tasks at various locations. The scope of work performed includes general construction, repair, remodel, and other repetitive related work to be performed under the management of DPWF. Minimum contract value is $50,000. Each contractor will receive aggregate job orders in that amount during the course of the contract. The estimated maximum contract value is $1 million. The county, however, reserves the right to exercise an option to increase the maximum contract value to the currently authorized California Public Contract Code amount of $4.7 million. Public Works and Facilities recommends that your board authorize the Director of DPWF or designee to execute job orders up to $250,000 for approved, funded projects and maintenance work. Staff will return to your board for authorization of job orders not meeting these criteria, and in order to proceed, it's requested that your board award the bid pursuant to the County Purchasing Manual. The estimated total cost of job orders to be awarded is anticipated to be $2 million. Job order contracting is a delivery method for appropriate projects funded in the Capital Projects Fund. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from any member of the board? Seeing none, any question or comments from any member of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring this back to the board. We have a motion, Holmes, a second, Duran. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Let's move to item D, Brewer Road over Pleasant Grove Creek Bridge Replacement Project. This would be a contract with Viking Construction Company of Rancho Cordova. Welcome.
Right. Thanks for having me. Matt Randall with Public Works and Facilities. And it's nice to be here in the afternoon, actually. So asking you to award a bridge construction contract. The specific action is to adopt a resolution to award and execute construction contract 962 to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder, Viking Construction of Rancho Cordova, California, for this project in the amount of $2,394,480. And we're also asking you to authorize the Director of Public Works and Facilities, or his designee, to execute contract change orders up to 10% of the contract amount with no single change order exceeding $150,000. This is in our current 17-18 fiscal year budget, and it's funded 100% with the Federal Highway Bridge Program. So a couple of notable items. This is an old bridge. It's near the end of its useful life and needs to be replaced, which is why we're doing the project. Your board authorized our department to, with procurement services, to advertise the project on August 15th. We received 7 bids, and Viking Construction was the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. We didn't receive any bid protests, which is why we're here asking for the award. It's before Thanksgiving, and this is actually, we're early. This is a project that we're planning to go to construction next summer. The actual bridge construction would occur between May and October of next year, similar to the way that we're doing Wise Road. So the plan is to close the road, notify everyone like we usually do, all the stakeholders, and make sure all of that's set up. The reason why we're coming so early is one of our environmental mitigations is actually to net the bridge to prevent swallows from nesting on the bridge. And so the construction contractor would be required to do that or take other means to make sure that no nesting occurs so that the bridge demolition can occur after we close the road in May or June. So with that, just open it up to any questions.
Any questions, comments from any member of the board? I see none. Any questions or comments from any member of the public on this item? I see none. Bring it back to the board. I have a motion Wygant, a second Duran. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Matt. All right, we're going to move to agenda item 4E. This is the purchase of various John Deere heavy equipment from multiple vendors. Welcome, Kevin.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. This next item is asking you to approve 3 purchase orders that will allow us to purchase 5 different pieces of equipment, 2 motor graders, a loader, a backhoe, and a new mower to keep our roads clean. We utilize the National Joint Powers Alliance purchasing method to more or less piggyback off other jurisdictions' competitive bids so that we didn't go out to a competitive bid and got the equipment that we were looking to get. And we were able to do that $2,000 under our budget, so that's good news. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have, and Don Anderson and Brett are here who really orchestrated this to provide more details if you need them.
And Don, I might note, is wearing a tie. I was very excited by that fact, actually. Any questions or comments from any member of the board? Seeing none, any questions or comments from any member of the public, tie wearing or otherwise? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Pleasure of the board. We have a motion Holmes, a second Wygant. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any extensions? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are now going to move, we're 1 minute early. We're going to wait 12 seconds or something, and then we will move to our 3:45 Public Works and Facilities timed item. This is the Plaster Commuter Express fare modification item. And Will Garner will be presenting this today. And you still have about 10 seconds, Will, so
walk slowly.
Stretch, as they say in showbiz.
Good afternoon. Will Garner, Public Works. This item is
yes, and I actually, just for the members of the public, anyone who's looking, that clock is incorrect. My computer, my iPad, which is magically connected to the internet, says that it's 3:44 still. So we still need to wait just to meet the measure of the law. Sorry.
No problem. I'm looking at the clock right there.
Yeah. Yes, that's the clock on the screen.
There you go. Okay.
There you go, 3:45.
So, this item is the modification of the Plaster Commuter Express fare structure. And it's being done very simply to make the fare structure compatible with our new Connect card that we have. And the Connect card, very briefly, was something we launched in June with 9 other transit organizations in the Sacramento area to have a uniform smart card to ride the bus with in various jurisdictions, so you could not have to carry multiple fare cards if you're going, say, from Placer County Transit to Sacramento Regional Transit, vice versa. And so with that, it has a couple of things that make it not possible to have a couple of our fare cards that we've had for a long, long time. And one of those being our 20 ride pass on Placer Commuter Express. And so the way we're handling that is to simply do away with the 20 ride in order to convert as many people over to Connect card because they're asking for it. And it's very convenient. And then replace that with the similar or the same cash value that they would pay on a per ride basis. So on the Connect card, you're able to load as much cash or as little cash as you need on there to accommodate how much you're going to travel. And so what we're asking for today is a modification to the cash value fares that we're currently charging on the Connect card to then mimic and be the same as what it would cost to ride on the 20 ride pass. And there's a table, figure 1, within the staff report that shows the entire fare structure for Placer Commuter Express, and it shows what we're changing. The changes are slight, and they're meant to be able to have one fare out of the Sacramento downtown area when we return in the afternoon, but then all of the morning fares match up with that fare. And we had to set the fare at a certain level so as to not be cheaper than the city of Roseville's transit system, so that we have a bunch of people then swarming over our buses, which are already nearly full on this particular service. So anytime we change the fares, the Board of Supervisors has to hold a public hearing. And so I will basically, I'll state the recommendation, which is to conduct a public hearing and approve a fare modification for Placer Commuter Express to transition the existing 20 ride pass to cash value charge per boarding on the Connect card effective January 1st, 2018. And the fares will remain the same or slightly reduced with that action.
Thank you, Will. Before I open the public hearing, I'll see if there's any questions or comments from any member of the board. Okay, I see none. I will open the public hearing. This is the opportunity for any member of the public to weigh in on this agenda item. This is a public hearing. All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. I have a motion Holmes, a second Duran. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We are now going to move to our closed session. County Council will take us away to that agenda item.
Regular agenda, 3 existing litigation matters and 3 real property matters, and 1 item on the supplemental agenda, which is an additional real property matter.
Okay, and after closed session, we will be back here at 6 o'clock for our next timed item.
That.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm here all night.
The board met in closed session to discuss 3 existing litigation matters. In Coral Baganas workers' comp claim, the board gave direction. Christopher Lull versus County of Placer, the board authorized the defense of the named county staff defendants. Kirchner versus County, the board authorized defense of named county staff and authorized the retention of outside counsel for named county staff. The board also discussed 3 real property items that are on the regular agenda and gave direction on all 3. On the supplemental agenda, the board considered 1 additional real property matter and gave direction. This concludes the report out of closed session.
Great. Thank you very much, Karen. We will move now to our 6 o'clock timed item. This is an update on various homeless initiatives. Welcome to everyone who's come out tonight. For those of you who have not been to a Board of Supervisors meeting before, I'll just sort of give you an overview of how this process rolls out. County staff will give a presentation. There are some additional presenters here, including Dr. Marbut. They will give presentation. The board will ask what are sort of clarifying questions. Then we will open it up for public comment. In terms of public comment, at the table outside in the lobby, are cards with group numbers and then numbers of those groups. So if you are interested in commenting, grab one of those cards. So you will be able to line up by group and then by number, and that way it'll just make the process a little bit easier to keep moving forward. We won't have to keep asking, is there anyone else who wants to comment? Because we will already know, because you will have comment cards. Once public comment has been finished, this will come back to the Board of Supervisors. When I say this will come back to the Board of Supervisors, this is an information-only item. The board will not be taking any actions tonight. There is nothing on the agenda that the board will be making any decision about tonight. So I think, unless I miss something, I think that covers the process. So again, if you are interested in speaking tonight, there are comment cards out in the lobby. If you want to grab one of those, now would be a good time, or you can wander out during the presentation and grab them then. All right, so we will begin with let me make sure you are on. Okay.
Great. All right, thank you. Good evening, Chair Montgomery, members of the board, Jeff Brown, your Health and Human Services Director. I'm also accompanied by Ken Graham, the Director of Public Works and Facilities, and Dr. Marbut, our county's consultant on homeless services. So this evening, we will be updating you on a number of homeless planning services initiatives, including the Marbut Report of 2015, housing and other service initiatives, public protection partnerships, and the most recent homeless point-in-time count. We will also be briefing you on potential locations for homeless services sites and seeking your direction on further actions related to homeless programming. As a bit of background, you can see on this slide, we moved forward in 2004 in conjunction with the Plaster Consortium on Homelessness to develop the first 10-year plan to end homelessness for Placer County. In response, we developed a continuum of care to better coordinate our efforts internally, but also to access U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development funding for housing and service initiatives. So during this 10-year period, we were able to bring to Placer County over $1 million a year in funding, primarily to support supportive housing programs. We also merged our continuum of care with that of Nevada County to create a regional continuum of care. And we created a nonprofit organization, the Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras, to administer the larger regional continuum of care. And then in 2014, we contracted with Dr. Marbut to perform a larger needs assessment of homelessness within our county and to provide us with some recommendations on how we could strengthen the continuum. Okay. So Dr. Marbut completed his assessment in early 2015. He found some successes, but he found a number of areas needing improvement, including our high level of chronically homeless adults, existence of 3 distinct regions with unique service needs, and a lack of information tools to provide more coordinated care. Dr. Marbut's report made a number of suggestions, including improving our homeless management information system, HMIS, increasing permanent housing options for homeless individuals, and the opening of a services center in the Auburn area to meet local needs. So under the leadership of the Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras, staff convened 4 working groups to address HMIS, service centers in both Mid-Placer and South Placer, and permanent housing. Both the South Placer and HMIS groups continue to meet to better coordinate services and the expansion of HMIS as a coordinated case management tool. And the permanent housing group met for a little over a year and merged with a larger effort that's being coordinated by the Placer Community Foundation, which continues to meet. So since Dr. Marbut's recommendations, in conjunction with our local continuum of care, we've initiated a number of housing and service expansions, including enhancement to our HMIS system and a contract to move forward with coordinated entry using a local Nevada County contractor connecting point. We've taken great steps in expanding services with a number of new efforts. Most noteworthy is the startup of our whole person care 4-year pilot program. $20 million program over 4 years. We have over 100 individuals enrolled in this program. We have about 13 individuals to date that we've moved into permanent housing. And we hope to work with roughly 450 individuals by the time the project is over. We're also in the process of expanding access to mental health services. We've been starting up screening clinics so people can be screened within the same day. Our goal is to really shorten the lead time for individuals that need to see a psychiatrist to less than a few weeks. In the past, it's been as high as a couple of months. And we hope to add psychiatric services in Auburn within the next 6 months. And then we're also moving forward to implement a drug Medi-Cal waiver program to expand drug Medi-Cal services to our residents that receive Medi-Cal. It's their health insurance. The big benefit of this will be really increasing services, including inpatient treatment and detox services. We've increased the ability of our housing authority to better serve homeless individuals by instituting a limited homeless preference. 50% of the turnover vouchers in our Housing Choice Voucher program we set aside for homeless individuals, and our housing coordinators will be working with them to get them into permanent housing. We've also been working with the VA to do better outreach and to better serve our veterans. In the last year, we've increased the utilization of our VASH program, these are vouchers for veterans, by about 20%. So we worked tirelessly to increase permanent housing options for our homeless population. You can see a number of projects listed there. The first 3 are all moving forward and will be in place within the next 3 months. They will yield close to 40 additional housing slots. And when Meta Housing moves forward in conjunction with the City of Roseville, that will yield another 10 housing placement opportunities. We also have put in place programs to work with families. Our CalWorks Housing Support Program served over 30 families last year. Our housing coordinators work with all of our program efforts, also work with the City of Roseville. They work with veterans, but the main focus of their work is to reach out, work with landlords, get them engaged with our program, and match individuals with what we think is the best specific housing option for them. We're also moving forward with securing funds for the upcoming No Place Like Home program. This is going to be a bond initiative that we very likely will be able to access funds to build permanent housing for individuals, homeless individuals with serious mental illness. So other efforts that are noteworthy, we've worked collaboratively with probation and the sheriff's office to staff the homeless liaison team. This is the team with the problem-oriented policing, the POP officers. So they work directly in the community with outreach efforts to encourage homeless individuals to engage in services rather than refuse to engage and cycle endlessly through the jail and through the local hospital emergency room and through our psychiatric health facility. And Lieutenant Brian Silva from the Sheriff's Office is present with some of his POP officers and is available to answer any questions that you may have. And then finally, we just opened up a medical respite unit in conjunction with the Gathering Inn to provide respite for individuals being discharged from the hospital. These are individuals being discharged, not serious enough to stay in the hospital, still have medical needs, and they have nowhere to go. So transitioning to the homeless count, it was done in January 2017. We counted 663 individuals, relatively consistent. If you go over our homeless counts in the last decade, they were in the 590 to 600 range. So a slight increase, significantly lower than the region and the state. In 2017, we saw increases of homelessness in South Placer. We also counted less people in Mid Placer and very small numbers in East Placer. We saw a decrease in families, which is consistent over time, and an increase in single adults. Now, this next chart basically looks at homeless point-in-time count numbers since 2013. So it's over a 4-year period. And you can see that per 1,000 residents, our number is roughly 1.73 homeless individuals counted. Over a 4-year period, modest increase of 12%. You can look at Butte County, the only rural county up on that chart, and they have 3 times as many homeless individuals with half the population. So you can see their per capita rate is very high. It's even higher than San Francisco at 8.77 individuals counted per 1,000. And you can see rapidly growing. And then you go to our next closest neighbor, Sacramento, and you can see they have a per capita number that's about 50% higher than Placer County. But more alarming, look at the growth rate over the past 4 years, 44%. And then, of course, you can see the growth rates in LA. San Francisco has not really grown that much, only 2% over 4 years, but they have one of the highest per capita rates. So not much room to grow in San Francisco. So in terms of homelessness, the Tahoe region has relatively few dedicated homeless resources to serve its modest homeless population. So what do we mean by modest? Well, in the 2017 homeless count in both eastern Placer and eastern Nevada counties, we found 33 individuals in January of 2017 sleeping outside and an additional 14 individuals in the local domestic violence shelter. So to begin to meet the needs in this region, especially during the winter, a number of key stakeholders moved forward to create a seasonal emergency warming center. And it's been essentially in operation the last 2 winters. The center opens during extreme weather events. What's an extreme weather event in this region? Well, more than 1 foot of snow on the ground and a temperature less than 15 degrees. And all I can say is people are very hardy on the eastern part of our county. Last year, this operation sheltered 440 unique individuals. Another 28 came by to take advantage of meals and other services, but they chose to sleep in their cars. And this shelter cost $32,000 to operate. Most of the support was from private grants, some of the local congregations, other individual donations, and some grants from local government. We actually contributed $5,000 to support this effort. So in terms of Mid-Placer, the shelter located at the Placer County Government Center here at the DeWitt campus has been in operation since 2015, currently serving 100 individuals per night. Operated by Volunteers of America, current contract extends through the end of the fiscal year. Contract incorporated a number of recommendations from the North Auburn MAC to ensure quality operations while at the same time protect public safety. This contract is due to be rebid in January 2018. And I must add that this shelter works very closely with both our Whole Person Care Project and our Adult System of Care, acts as a key entry point into our system of services, while at the same time achieving positive outcomes. And at this point, I'd actually like to invite Dr. Marbut to the podium to share his thoughts regarding our progress to date in implementing his recommendations, but also share his thoughts regarding the current operations of the Mid-Placer facility operated by VOA.
Can you go back to that
yes,
slide?
thank you. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you very much. I've been asked to sort of reflect on the recommendations of the report and talk a little bit about the Right Hand Auburn, Volunteers of America Shelter, and such. So I'll be about 10 minutes and go through these pretty quickly. In terms of the recommendations, there have been great improvements made and there are a lot, probably about 20 identified, but there were 6 I wanted to really focus on because they're really, they've been dramatic improvements, but they're really leading. When you look at these numbers, something is going right. I mean, this is probably, to me, the most important slide in terms of the number, and the question is, why is it going right? And some of these improvements include the movement toward universality of HMIS, getting everybody to start moving toward getting the same information and integrating the data, not just as a counter, but using it as a case management tool. Probably the most impressive overall thing I've seen is before decision-making was a lot of individual one-off, just sort of tactical decision. We got a problem here, do it, problem here, there. There's really a move toward a more strategic thinking and holistic approach. And that's not just paying off in the last 2 years. That's going to pay off for years to come. And so moving to much more strategic thinking rather than tactical. Much more system-oriented, integrated. Before, again, operations were operating independently, a lot more coordination between geography, but in particular functionality. Looking at what's going on with the law enforcement, both the probation and the deputies, integrating with the shelter or the center, integrating with the home team and such. So things are much, much more integrated. Housing placements. This was the one when I saw the numbers. This is when I'm surprised. I didn't think you were going to get a lot of housing placements because of you're basically at functional capacity. You're operating pretty close to 1% vacancy. Most developers historically have said 2.7 is functional capacity with turnover and change. You've been in and out of that 1%, probably dipped under it a couple times, a little over 1%. And so to get any sort of placements of any meaningful level is really amazing how well you've done that. And you're eating that elephant sort of one bite at a time. There are a lot of different reasons why there's not one silver bullet, but that's been very, very impressive. VOA, RHA, in terms of the shelter operation, moving to the 24/7 is so important because that cuts out the hanging out during the day, gets people into the integrated program, a lot more case management functionally goes on, so that was a major improvement. And then the whole person care, that wasn't even on the radar when I was around. I mean, what has been done there, I got to tell you, when you look at the match and such, the power that gives you not only immediate but long term, that's going to pay off for probably a couple of decades, I think, what you're doing. And I got to tell you, places all around California and the rest of the country would die to have that type of program. And then when you start to see how that's integrated with law enforcement, integrated with the shelter, great improvements. So when you start to look at those plus many others, you start to see, I went out and looked at all the encampment sites that I had seen before. So I went to all the places that we had found large encampments, regular encampments, and I found none. Now, I didn't, I've only been here 2 days, so I didn't have time to go everywhere. But the encampment numbers aren't, in terms of the locations that they were before, looking at the regular locations, the ones that kept popping up, they clear out and pop back up, clear out. Found none. I'm sure there's some out there, no doubt, again, but I just went out with the limited time. Henry's Lawn, just, right out here, was, 2.5 years ago, where just dozens of people camped out and tented out and that. Not there anymore. The hanging out in the business districts, when you go down, before you would have 20 or 30 people at each of the major intersections sort of operating sort of a cluster effect in panhandling. I didn't see any panhandling. Again, it's only a 2-day visit and such. But you didn't see any of the clustering. You didn't see people in the gutters, the back alleys going in back to the behind the box areas. I saw one person sort of that is a person I met before, sort of moving through the community in the business area, but that was it. Before, it was 5 or 6 people moving together. Each intersection had 20 or 30 people operating out of that, and that all of that is moved inside and has worked. And also, you have to account for when you talk about 40 placements outside of the shelter. The one, I think 15 or 16 you talked about through the whole person care program, and you start to see those placements, they start to really take effect. I think you will see, and again, it's hard to number because the numbers are just starting to come in, and it'll take a while to see. I think that you're going to find the overall incidence in the neighborhood area probably are down or at least flat. But the types of incidents, when you talk to law enforcement, are much more benign than they were before. So the intensity, I'm not saying bad things don't happen, I'm not Pollyannish in that way, but the aggregated number of the types of incidents are becoming more toward the misdemeanor, less to the felony level. You start to look at the integration of the law enforcement, both the outreach team. The other day, and it wasn't planned, nobody knew I was coming over, and I just dropped in. I saw a law enforcement person working with 2 people from the whole person care with one of the shelter assistants, and all 4 were working with one particular individual who is needed. You didn't see any of that. Even in the early days of the management of the shelter, you didn't see that before. ER impact, again, anecdotal, don't know the numbers, but the anecdotal numbers are down. And the integration system of the 114 members in the whole person care, now it's fully implemented where if they hit the individual, if they hit an ER, they get a text back to the case managers to say a person's hitting ER, and that allows you to come in and actively engage a person often within a day and be able to find out what's going on, how's it going, and such, and sort of why you're hitting there. And as that number aggregates up, you'll be able to for sure see if the antidotes are proved out and such. The overall success, the fact that 40 people have been placed out of the shelter, the Mid-Auburn, the Mid-County shelter north is just really an amazing number when you think for a period of time there were 47 people in the shelter, and to have 40 placed, now over time that's gone up to 100, but say that averaged about 75 over a 2-year period, that penetration in is really important. Now, as for the shelter proper, leadership matters, and the change in the leadership you can just feel it, see it, and see the change in the protocols, change of the procedures, much improved there. There's an attempt now to take the advisory board information and plug that information in and get that input and make needed changes. And I know one that appears to be sort of superficial but was sort of aggravating people a couple of years ago was the entry, the congregating area, and the parking lot were on the east side, and it was very, very visual and never was changed, even though it was talked about. Under the new leadership, when that was brought up, within 24 hours, everything shifted to the back side or to the west side, a less visible area. I've noticed dramatic improvement in the cleanup area, not just right around the shelter center itself, but the overall DeWitt, because they send the crews out. I've even suggested maybe you even want to go a little further out now, because the building is clean. There's a check every hour now during daylight hours, and then once a month the cleanup, and you start looking at even the amount of cleanup from a month to month has been dropping, so that shows that is getting implemented. There's before I saw much more hanging out, even on the colder days. Last time I was here was much colder time frame, and so this is a little warmer now, and still, so you would expect more hanging out, visual hanging out, and that's just simply lower. And so when you go through I'm a real big believer leadership matters, and it really has made an overall impact. Then you add in the whole person care. And that's just an incredible program. And when you integrate that with the outreach team and law enforcement, those three different organizations, that one of them didn't even exist, one really wasn't being implemented well, and the one wasn't coordinated. They're now really working seamlessly, and that is amazing. And I went to a facility meeting yesterday, and we talked a lot about operations beyond facility, and you start seeing the level of impact. And I think really putting the residency, there was a residency requirement that probably didn't have a lot of teeth before, and having that teeth in that really, I think it just, clamps down on the misuse and the inappropriate use, and that's significantly there. So those are the good things. The challenge now is, what do you do? This was recommended for an interim facility. It was never intended. There are issues about the kitchen, needing commercial kitchen and such, and siting facilities are very difficult. I'm a former elected person. I understand siting is tough because you have NIMBYism and you have no perfect facilities, and there's never a perfect site. And then you frustrate between the location of the neighborhoods and the community and the business community. But then you also have the real issues of finances. Often the higher capital costs put in are places that are not going to work very well. And so then you start balancing capital costs versus operating costs versus the location, and those are real issues to it. And so there's never a perfect location. But one way or the other, there really needs to be an ultimate decision, because this was an interim setup, and so there's some things in there that we sort of said you would tolerate for a period of time, but we either need to permanently address and say that's it, or find a location. And I get that's a tough issue, and I appreciate that, but a decision does need to be made one way or the other. And one last thing connected to the facility is there needs to be a real understanding this is not a closed-loop system. Anytime you deal with human nature and the humanity, you don't say, well, here's our old number of homelessness, and now if we've addressed this many people, so our number should be down to here. There's always people appearing, whether it's returning veterans into the community with post-traumatic stress or domestic violence or mental health or behavioral health or substance abuse. There's always a new flow of people coming in, so you have to really watch that understanding and understand that it's how that addressing is going down. Which gets me to the last thing I want to just, really hit this slide one last time. When you look at those numbers, that is an amazing number. There's an AP story that came out last week that was the national front page on many front pages last week, and they're doing a series of stories. From San Diego to Seattle, the average growth has been over 20% a year, up and down. Just up and down. The only reason San Francisco doesn't get growth, San Francisco is sort of like a water bowl, and it's already full. And when you pour water in it, you might get 2% more, but it overflows. And that's the only reason. You can go into San Francisco and go to places that you can't literally walk down a street because the numbers are so high, the service centers are full, all the housing first is full, and it's still going. That's the only reason their growth number isn't that, they just can't grow anymore. But if you look everywhere else, and San Diego numbers, I think are even more pronounced than this. San Diego's had such an epidemic, and they've also had the problem, the hepatitis problem that came, and you read a lot about that. And so the fact that you only have a 12% growth when everybody else is going 20% per year, which would have put the par around 40%, and you're at 12%, that's something you're doing right is keeping that number from just skyrocketing. And so you can't just say it's a urban area, non-urban area, because you look at Butte, what's going on there. And so your percent of population or a per capita number is dramatically low, and your growth is dramatically lower than everybody else. It did grow, but compared to everybody else, anybody else in California would trade you those numbers, would trade you that growth number. And so that's where you have to say, take a breath and go, what we're doing is really working. And all these other cities are trying to do stuff, and it's not working as well. And so something you're doing, people around you, people rural, people urban, you're below everybody. And so what is it you're doing and what is you're capturing? And I know nothing's perfect. That, you can't be Pollyannish about it. But some of the efforts that have been made have really started to change. And so as you address the shelter, I think it's always in the centers, I think it's always important to remember some of the good stuff and not just focusing on all the negatives. So with that, I don't know, I think Jeff's taking it from here, and then thank you very much.
So in regards to South Placer, the Gathering Inn is the main provider of these emergency housing services. It was actually the first homeless emergency housing program in our county. Currently serves up to 90 individuals each night, rotating between participating congregations. The number of beds that are available depends on the individual congregation, how big their sanctuary is. Been a great partner agency for our county, working to connect individuals and families to services, including our whole person care initiative. Our county supports both their day center and also the general shelter operations. And so on the next slide, we'll see if it made it in. These are the locations of the member congregations of the Gathering Inn in South Placer. And so what you can see from this slide is most, if not all of the cities have participating congregations, and then there's congregations also in the unincorporated area. So it's really spread out over a very, very large area. And so now I'd like to invite Brooke Steffens and Steve Lamb, board directors for the Placer Rescue Mission, to come forward and provide an update of their organization's latest efforts.
Good evening. I'm Brooke Stevens, President of the Board for Placer Rescue Mission. I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors for having us here tonight to give an update on Placer Rescue Mission's Campus of Hope. For those of you that aren't as familiar with Placer Rescue Mission, our organization formed out of a group of residents, business owners, and community members who are concerned about the issue of chronic homelessness in Placer County. At last count, there were 663 homeless in Placer. These numbers include women, children, and veterans. And every time these counts come in, the numbers are increasing. Our goal at Placer Rescue Mission is to go beyond a temporary fix of a place to sleep and a meal to eat. Placer County does not need another new shelter. That is not why Placer Rescue Mission formed. We believe that the solution to chronic homelessness lies in looking at the bigger picture: job training, counseling, housing, and social services. Our desire is to see individuals set free from addiction, mental illness, homelessness, and transformed to be physically and spiritually healthy and equipped to become members of society. We want to see people reach their own best possible potential. For some, that may mean temporarily using our services before moving on, and for others, it means our campus becomes their permanent residence. To achieve this vision, we are in the process of developing the Campus of Hope. Our campus will provide supportive housing integrated with critical services placed into a single multi-service campus. Ideally, it will be a coalition of nonprofits, churches, businesses, and government agencies partnering together to meet the needs of residents on campus. Instead of the residents having to seek out transportation to travel from one service provider to another in Placer County, the services will come to them. Also, by creating a partnership with other service providers and co-locating facilities, it is a much more cost-effective and efficient model than what Placer presently has. Right now, Placer Rescue Mission is in the conceptual phase. We are working with SKW Architects to design 120 units of supportive housing. These will be studio apartments with living, dining, and sleeping space, as well as kitchens and bathrooms. Veterans, women, and children will all be eligible for this housing, and in fact, 60 of these units will be designated specifically for women and children. In addition, Placer Rescue Mission will have 100 units of emergency interim housing. These units will be used for intake into our facility so that we can assess each person and family that arrives on campus and decide what is the best placement for them. The Campus of Hope will be a closed campus, and you will have to be a resident of Placer County to access our facilities. Again, we're in the conceptual phase, so exact specifications for this requirement have not yet been spelled out. However, I do know that we plan to look at best practices from other organizations that have residency requirements in order to come up with our own policies and procedures. The hub of the campus will be the multi-purpose center. It's here that residents can access social services, a cafeteria, laundry facilities, job training, counseling, attend classes and workshop, and have a central gathering place. Among other things on the grounds of the campus, there will be facilities and a play area for children residing on campus and gardens where food can be grown and used in the cafeteria. We estimate needing about 7 acres for a campus of this size. Because we're in the very early stages of designing the campus, we do not have a definitive price tag other than to say it will cost in the millions. And regardless of the cost, Placer Rescue Mission is dedicated to privately funding the Campus of Hope. So the next step in the process for us will be fundraising. PRM firmly believes that the Campus of Hope will be transformational in Placer County. We see this as a solution to the rise in homelessness in our county and a way to rehabilitate those in need instead of simply putting a Band-Aid on the problem by opening yet another shelter. At this time, I'd like to have Steve Lamb discuss the feasibility study.
Thank you, and hello. I'm Steve Lamb, Cartwright Engineers, Board of Directors with Placer Rescue Mission. And we took a look at the 4240 property located on Cincinnati and Rockland, unincorporated Placer County. And it suits the needs of this project quite well. It's got some physical constraints and physical challenges that I believe we can overcome. Some of those constraints and challenges range from filling some septic ponds with about 160,000 cubic yards of fill. The site is able to be served by utilities within the area. And the property exists in a portion of the community where there's jobs that are going to be created. There's great avenues for transportation. It's very much adjacent to the Santucci Justice Center. So it serves as a great capillary for the community. Any questions?
At this point? Okay.
As far as the challenges in stealing. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. As far as the challenges go, how far have you gone into looking at cost?
We've analyzed some costs. It's predicated on what is happening with our programming. We've looked at a general cost to fill. The nexus of the study was to create a buildable lot, what needed to happen. And so we took a brief look at what it would cost to bring in and import the fill, if the fill was available at the landfill or adjacent communities, or if there was any needed export, and we could take it for free. We're looking at about $2 million to fill the facility, and that's being a little bit conservative, assuming we have to fill it completely to the top and make it one gross buildable lot. So getting a little creative, we hope we could skim that down and make it a little smaller and more attainable, but that's the perfect world situation.
And that would be consistent with anybody that wanted to build on that site.
Correct.
They would have to
make it marketable for whomever. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I see no additional questions right now, but you guys will be sticking around for a while if other questions come up, either from the board or public.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Ken Grimm with the Department of Public Works and Facilities. The next part, we want to start talking a little bit about our recent efforts to explore alternative sites for a shelter facility here in the Mid-Placer area, Greater Auburn. Little background, May 9th of this past year, your board approved a limited term conditional use permit to continue operating a shelter here at the Placer County Government Center. In addition to that, you approved a site access agreement with Volunteers of America to operate that shelter. At that same time, and actually some of the board meetings before that, your board expressed a desire to explore alternatives, that there may be a better site for this location than where it's currently being operated. In fact, the purpose of that 5-year conditional use permit was to give us the opportunity to identify a site, acquire it, and eventually develop it, a very time-intensive process. So we established a small ad hoc group that helped us kind of work through some of the different issues, talk about what some of the criteria should be, and what some of those different areas around the community might be that might be a better fit for a shelter facility. So we started, as we started first talking about what are the needs of a shelter. And so starting with, we decided that, hey, we need this space for approximately 100 people. That's what we have today. And we expect that to take, at a minimum, approximately 1 acre of land to be able to do that. We talked about the desire to have availability of water, sewer, and utility services. Yes, you can always bring in water, sewer to anywhere, but it can be very costly. Having those services at least nearby, very beneficial. Probably hard to develop a property or a facility such as this on a septic system or on well water. Not impossible, but it might be a little bit more difficult. We also looked at proximity to social services, employment, and housing, making sure that where we're housing people, they're close to the other areas of life that they're going to be needed, whether those are services to help them, whether it's employment, whatever the case may be. Proximity to public transportation, making sure people could get to the greater world from wherever they're at to get to wherever they need to be. We talked about the desirability of having an existing suitable building. The existing suitable building is, again, not necessarily a requirement, but we did some cost estimating. A new facility, perhaps 20,000 square feet, commercial kitchen, everything that you might want to have in a facility to, again, acquire land, get it entitled, and to develop it could easily be $9 to $10 million. If we can find an existing facility, that cost can come substantially down. It's only the cost of remodeling a facility. So we tried to find that, but we didn't make that a litmus test. We looked for proper zoning. Your board allows emergency shelter types of services to be in typically commercial, multifamily, and industrial areas. So we tried to focus on those areas as a general rule of thumb. And then finally, we wanted it to be available for sale. We're not here to talk about taking already active, used, well-used properties. This was about finding underutilized properties and finding a new use for them, whether vacant or with an existing building on there. So that's what the shelter would need to provide the services. Then it was, what about the community? The community also had some needs. And so I think some of those needs that we were discussed included creating distance from residential neighborhoods. Everybody had a different idea of maybe how far that distance should be. I think a lot of people would want it further, some maybe not as concerned with it. But it was very important, I think, to everyone that there needed to be some level of distance. Distance from schools. I think that had a lot to do with children and concerns about the interaction with children. So that was an important point that folks brought up. We also looked at outside airport overflight zones. So the Airport Land Use Commission around the Auburn Airport there's some policy that has deemed that shelter populations are probably not compatible within the core areas of the overflight zone. And so we tried to stay out of those areas wherever we could. And then finally, this is really not a community criteria, but I had to put it somewhere. And so we really looked at all of our efforts were focused in the unincorporated area. Could we have looked in the cities or somewhere else? I guess we could have, but we focused on those areas that the county had more control, particularly land use authority over. So let's talk, this is small, we're going to get some blow-ups in a minute, but we're going to talk just a little bit about what we're talking about doing here. So we started with this idea of trying to identify where are the areas that are actually zoned to allow for a shelter. Those are these yellow, orangish, that's a word, areas in the greater Auburn area. You'll see it in different areas. As we blow up and as we actually talking as a group, this map also showed some of the areas of schools. They talked about the overflight zones, which are those purple lines, various gradations of that overflight zone. That shows up on there, as well as the government center, which is the current location, which is that red cross-hatched area right there. So we essentially on this map, we identified 4 areas. We identified the area up by the airport, call it the airport commercial area. There's a block of that yellow. The Highway 49 corridor going through through most of the unincorporated of North Auburn. Those areas are zoned correctly. But the Bowman Road area off of Interstate 80, you can see there's some sporadic, not a necessarily consistent zoning for that, but there's some sporadic areas for that. And then finally there at the lower left is the Ophir Road area going down towards Newcastle, where there is a strip of heavy commercial types of uses down there also. So those are the 4 areas we started with. And so as we start talking a little bit more detail, we'll start with the Highway 49 corridor, kind of stretching, I'll say, from Bell Road going down Highway 49, I guess technically all the way down to, what's that, Nevada Street. But I think if you look at this area, characterize it is a large block, continuous block, but you do start finding residences as soon as you get outside the corridor. Very quickly you have residences on both sides, particularly on the east side where there's more smaller lot, higher density housing. The west side, maybe not quite so dense, but there are some residences out there also. Highway 49 corridor does have very good transit. We operate hourly service that connects people just about to anywhere they want to go, but goes all the way up to Dry Creek Road and all the way down to the transfer station down in Auburn where people can get to wherever it is they want to go. I think as we talked about this area, what I heard a lot of, you know what, when you talk about other sites in this area, it's not too far removed from the current site at the government center, and is it really much different than what's already out there? So I think that was kind of the con that I heard. Not to mention there's not as many properties available there, because that's kind of our prime commercial area going down Highway 49. The next area we didn't look at initially, but we ended up talking about it more because I think people wanted to, was the airport commercial area. And I think probably because the pros of that is those large blocks of yellow. So when you get into the middle of those yellow areas, you definitely can maximize your distance from residential areas. So that was a positive. There is transit service along Loxley Lane going down New Airport over to Bell Road, so there is some level of transit service within that area. But this is right in the middle of, you see those purple concentric lines. In fact, a lot of that big yellow area is in the most stringent of the overflight area towards the end of the runway there. So after that, we took a look over at the Bowman Road area off of Interstate 80. I think in that area there's a lot of older buildings that probably could use some renovation, and that I guess I'll call that a positive. But on the negative side, very little blocks. You always have residential areas close by. There's also Bowman School, that's, depending on where you're at, is kind of smack dab in the middle there. So you never get too far away from the residential areas. There is transit service at least up to Bowman Road, the Bowman Road undercrossing, through Auburn Transit. So they actually operate a line that goes up Lincoln underneath the Bowman Road interchange and then comes down Bowman Road. So there is a level of transit service provided there. But I think the hardest thing there is just the sporadic nature of that zoning. So then we go down to the Ophir area, kind of where Ophir Road comes into Interstate 80. There's currently some businesses there. It's a heavy commercial area. There's also PCWA has some facilities out in that area also. There is some level of transit service there. We do operate our Taylor Road Shuttle, which is an every other hour service that goes through that area. So there is a level of transit. It does get removed a little bit from where the services are provided in the employment, although with transit there's always a way to get to those areas. As you look at this, you can see it's a very narrow band, so you're always getting close again to some of the residences, but the residences here do tend to be larger lots, so not saying good or bad, just saying that because it's less dense, you actually affect less individual people, just because of the large lot nature of the area. Sometimes there's limited utility services here. A lot of the sites we saw didn't have water or sewer, and you couldn't get it there unless you spent a lot of money. So pros and cons, again, of what we were able to see. So what we ended up doing for the group, we actually went through a drive-by survey through each of the areas. We went through and we looked what's for sale out there that met that kind of 1 acre, met roughly in the zoning. If it wasn't in the zoning, maybe if it was immediately adjacent and was available. We wanted to see what's available out there today. we identified in that first look, and that first look actually did not include the airport area at all. It only included the Bowman area. Let's see, why is it not, there it is, the Bowman area, Highway 49, and then the Ophir Road area. We identified 25 properties. 17 of those were vacant properties. And some of those have sold, and in the meantime, it's not a static thing, so things go. Some of the places we looked at probably have already sold. So we're not here to talk about necessarily individual sites today, more of these areas, but I want folks to know what we kind of went through the process, because at some point you have to look at individual parcels. So many of the sites were quickly discounted by the group for various of the criteria reasons we saw, just too many people close by, or a school, or whatever the case may be, that just said, gosh, that just isn't a good one. Others, they said, hey, we need some additional information. So we secured a commercial broker. We have one actually we work with regularly for all sorts of county needs that we have, to take out there and say, hey, why don't you go out there? We did this windshield survey, if you will. Can you go out there and actually take a look what is all available out there? And he came back, got some additional information on interest and what might be in those parcels that we had questions on, but then he also identified an additional 21 parcels. Many of those are in the airport area, only because there's such a large grouping of buildings up there, so there was a lot available. That info was shared with the group. And so that's when we got to this point where there is no perfect site. You know, there is, we took a look a lot of, you can check the boxes, and good, bad. There's just that pros and cons with any site we took a look at. And so at this point, we really have some questions we want to ask of your board to try to help narrow this down about how we move forward with how do we determine what the most important criteria are. And so these are the questions that we would ask. Any help we can get through public input and from your board would be very helpful if we try to narrow down the scope of this search. One is really the willingness, are we willing to build a new building on a vacant site, knowing that could easily cost $9 to $10 million. Yes, we can do some alternative construction materials, steel buildings that might be appropriate in some areas, and maybe you're able to cut that cost a little bit, but still a very substantial capital investment. Are we interested in doing that? Because if not, we narrow that net, so we start narrowing that net down more. Second question is, those criteria we shared, shelter and community, are those the right things? Did we miss something as a group? Or are there some, which would be also very beneficial, is when you consider them all even very difficult, are there some that are just much more critical and important to the community, to the board, that we can focus on those and not so much on some of the other criteria? And then finally, based on all the testimony and everything that occurs this evening, is there an area that just comes out as, hey, that's the area, or ones that can be totally struck out? All of that will help us bring, because in the end, depending on the answers to those questions, really the options moving forward are, do we start bringing individual sites to your board for consideration, for community input, for your board's input, or do we at least get the criteria so we can determine when something does come up for sale that we're ready to, I don't want to say pounce, but we're ready to purchase that when something comes up that we believe is the right fit. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions or comments from any member of the board at this point in time? Okay, I don't see any at this point. Ken, you are, as is everyone else, going to be hanging around for a while for any questions that do come up?
Absolutely.
Okay. Jeff, is there any additional staff presentation at this point? Okay, he's not mic'd. That concludes staff presentation. One thing that I did want to follow up on is, Jeff, both you and Dr. Marbut mentioned some perceptions around criminality and nuisance behavior. If I could have Lieutenant Silva or one of his POP officers come forward, I did have a couple of questions about the POP officers and their role in this process. Welcome.
What can I answer for you?
Well, I think my first question was, I think you heard basically some of the comments that were made around the operations of the POP officers and sort of general perceptions of crime and nuisance behavior, for lack of a better term, in the area. So what I'm interested in understanding is knowing that we didn't keep statistics on a lot of this stuff until about 2.5 years ago, in that the recent 2.5 years, how do you see, what are your statistics? What do you see as trends?
It's actually less than that.
It's less than that, okay.
The best statistics that we have go back to August of 16.
Okay.
That's when we actively started tracking the homeless and crime statistics.
So just about 1.25 years.
What's that?
So just about 1.25 years
Yes.
we've been tracking those statistics, yes. Okay.
For the North Auburn area, it fluctuates between 36 and 40% of calls for service are homeless related. When you compare that to countywide, which is pretty steady at about 17 to 20% of calls for service deal with the homeless.
And when you say calls for service, are those reports that you get from members of the community, or do those include officer-initiated contact?
It could be both. It could be anything from a deputy driving down the street, seeing someone and wishing to contact them, or it could be a citizen calling in to report a crime being committed.
Okay. So my expectation, and tell me if this would fall in line with your expectation, is that since we funded the POP officer program here in the North Auburn area, and our directive to you was go out and make contact, that we would probably see a higher number here than we would in the rest of the county where that direction hasn't been given.
That's accurate to say, yes.
Okay. And do you have any breakdown on contacts versus citations versus arrests and actually taking people to jail? He has lots of paper. Bear with us.
I do. I have lots of stats. For the calendar year-to-date this year, we have 703 transient-related either citations or arrest, and that's specifically for the HLD unit that I supervise.
And that's out of, what's the full total on those calls? So that's 703 out of some larger number?
703 out of 15,542.
Okay. So a not insignificant, but still fairly small portion of the total contacts resulted in a citation or an arrest?
Yes.
Okay. How about at the shelter? Have calls been up or down at the shelter, say, in the last 1.25 years that we've been tracking?
Specifically for the shelter, they have been consistently fluctuating between a low of 23 and a high of 71. And again, that goes back to August of 16.
And are those calls actually within the shelter or in the environs of the shelter?
And it could be both. The address of the shelter, it depends on how the deputy calls in.
Okay.
If he said he's in proximity to the shelter, it's going to come under the shelter address.
Okay.
And that's how we retrieve that data.
So it could be someone, for example, who was not allowed in the shelter.
If he was outside or he or she was outside, it could go under that stat, yes.
Okay. And then how about encampments? We heard comments from Dr. Marbut that he did a quick visual tour of the area and that from his perspective, encampments are down. What is your and your officer's take on that?
Overall, I would say yes, that's accurate. Respectively speaking, the park that was across the street from the shelter used to be a problem area, which is becoming much better for us.
Okay. And fairly recently, we had change in the management. The at the shelter, and just not asking for any statistics on that because you can't put statistics to relationship questions. But in terms of the relationship between PCSO, the POP officers, probation, and the folks who operate the shelter, is that an improved relationship? Is that do you have greater faith in the operation? Again, I'm sorry, I'm asking you not for statistics, but kind of a insight.
If you're asking for our personal opinion of it, yes, the relationship between the shelter and the sheriff's office has gotten better since the management change.
Okay. I think those were all my questions. Were there any questions from any member of the board for our officer, Kirk?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not.
Oh, I'm sorry, you nodded. I apologize.
Not for the officer.
Okay. Any for the officer?
I have a question.
Supervisor Holmes.
So your contact with the transients has gone up since we hired 4 new deputies to manage the population?
Yes.
So do you think that the population increased because we hired 4 deputies, or do you think that the population increased because we opened the shelter and more transients were coming?
I can't speculate on those numbers. All I can give you is the data that the deputies, the 4 HLD deputies that are out there making contacts, and their numbers. I couldn't tell you if it's directly related to the shelter or not.
I just thought that we hired 4 deputies because we had an increase in transients. That was my thought. I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's what I think. We hired 4 deputies because the transients were increasing. That's my opinion.
And they are out there to contact the homeless population.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Any other questions from any board member? Supervisor Wygant.
Following up on Supervisor Montgomery's question about the relationship improving with the new management at the shelter.
Yes.
How would you categorize that? How would you describe it? Is it good? Is it mediocre? Is it
I would say it's good.
Good, thanks.
Respectively speaking, compared to the management before, it's good.
Excellent, thanks.
Everything is relative. Yeah. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here tonight and being able to provide us with both some data and some insight. Thank you. All right. If we have no additional staff presentation, I'll start with the board to see if there's any clarifying questions that the board has for any of the presenters. Supervisor Duran.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a couple of questions of Dr. Marbut. Oh, okay.
Did you want me to go up or here?
No, that's fine. You can answer. You can answer right there. You're familiar that in addition to the program that we have related to the homeless, we also have a program at the other end of the spectrum that comes out of probation that assists when someone commits a crime and they go through our process and they spend a couple of nights at the Bonner Hotel and they get released. That that we're trying to assist them to get back on their feet. Between the 2 programs, a program that occurs after someone has committed a crime and gone through our process, and one that at the beginning where someone doesn't with regards to homelessness. Can you provide any insight on value with regards to cost?
And I'll talk national numbers because I haven't specifically looked at yours, but nationally it's much more expensive to go to jail. It's much more expensive, any incarceration program, and especially in the world of homeless, because you often will go in 1 or 2 days, but the first day of booking has a very high loaded cost. It's much more expensive on that first day than an average day. So it is much more cost effective to do any sort of diversion at the misdemeanor. If it's a felony, you need to go to jail. If it's a criminal felon offense, you got to go. But the criminalization at the misdemeanor level or the nuisance level just is very not cost effective. It's also generally not effective in any behavioral change. There's no indication, any data that shows the change. What will change behavior is getting into a recovery program and dealing with whatever the root cause, whether it's the mental health, behavioral health, or substance abuse.
So I'm sitting here as a policymaker trying to decide how I'm going to spend my money. And basically the decision to spend it on the front end is a better decision than spending it on the rear end.
It's much more cost effective, and it's overall more effective too.
Okay. Do you have any other comments, with regard, you showed us the numbers up there in that 12%. Is there, in your mind, any one thing that is occurring here that may directly affect that 12% more than others?
I don't think there's ever a silver bullet in this. I've never seen it. I've seen a lot of communities, whether it's a county or city, try one thing and it seldom works. The reason why I think you're doing so well is you're doing so well in a lot of different areas. Probation, sheriff deputies, the integration, the data, the better management of the facility. I think it's a lot of things going into that makes that number better than the rest of the state.
And going back to the system that we have, the front end and the rear end system, what is your opinion of that system as a continuum of handling the problem?
The front end is much more effective. And again, if it was equally effective, then we could talk about price. But it's one of those times where the system, the negativeness of going to jail, it doesn't do anything to change behavior and doesn't put you in a recovery program. So it's one of those cases that if you go into a really quality diversion program, it's much more effective and it's cheaper. Sometimes the effectiveness is opposite when you get into public policy, but this is a case where it's more expensive and less effective.
Okay.
If you go to jail.
Thank you. I've got one more question. With regards to residency, is there a national, I think here in HHS there's a 15-day state mandated residency for services. Some other private organizations can use their own kind of residency for, homeless individuals. Is there any type of a national standard out there as to when people are considered a resident for purposes of being homeless?
I don't think there's a standard. There's not, if you go to the national organizations, nobody says this is standard, but there are two things that are very acceptable. A active driver's license from that county, that's active, not a temporary one, but one with the picture that you've gotten through the mail, et cetera. And the other is whether you've been in the HMIS system, and you've had multiple contacts over a period of time. Those are the generally two accepted. And then from there, the next tier is, do you have ER data or some other social service data? But the real best is a driver's license and HMIS.
And one final question. You, in your original report to us, identified three specific areas: the East, the Auburn area, and the South Placer area. Could you again just kind of recap why and how you identified those groups? And I believe you also said that those groups wouldn't move from, the Eastern folks wouldn't come to Auburn, and the Auburn folks wouldn't go to the East, or they wouldn't go to Roseville, and the Roseville folks wouldn't go to Auburn. Could you just kind of talk about that? Because that seems to be the crux of a lot of angst out there.
And what's so
people are being
interesting,
shifted, they're being shipped from one place to another. So.
And what's interesting on that is the population of people experiencing homelessness is no different than the general population on this. If you ask around how much, whether at the hotel or restaurant I go, and you ask, do you move around? No, everybody stays either in the sort of the east, northeast, or the central, or the south. Very few people move around in the general population. So as a quick reminder, we did the data survey, and we asked, not only how do you associate with, and people very identified with their high schools, as you may remember for folks that weren't around. Even so much on the survey, we'd ask where your high school, they'd like go fighting cacti, whatever the mascot or the logo or the moniker of the high school. That's how identifiable they were to a particular community, many of the individuals. So people were self-identifying for an area. But then when we asked, how mobile are you? And asked, did you move around from another? Very, very low mobility. And that's actually proving out in real life data. That was taken in the, if you will, the hypothetical world. When you look at the shelter data, looking at the Volunteers of America right-hand Auburn shelter, over the last month and a half, it's been averaging about 19% wait list to get in, up to 30 last night. It was colder, wetter, et cetera. Yet there was availability to go down to the gathering end, and folks would not take up that opportunity to go down. And so likewise, gathering end individuals have had opportunity to come up, and folks will not move between the location. A small group will, but the large number will not move across location, even if there's availability, even with transportation. And so people really stay in their zone, their sector.
Thank you very much. Jim, you don't have to worry about anything. If I ever go homeless, I'm not coming to Auburn.
Supervisor Euler, did you have something?
Yeah. First of all, I appreciate your comment about you referred to the closed loop. I refer to this as not being a zero-sum game. You're not, for every person that you're taking out of homelessness, you're not assuring that somebody else hasn't come in. So the relatively static nature of those numbers belies the fact that we have been successful in moving some people out of homelessness, and especially when you see an increase, albeit limited as you described. The area that I felt we had the greatest potential to have a significant impact based on the first study, where we saw a significant number of chronic homeless. And the chronic homeless to me means they're identifiable from both an individual standpoint as well as an issue standpoint. And so unfortunately I didn't see in the second data set I didn't see anything that spoke to that issue of where are we in that chronic homeless population, and are we driving that number down?
Well, that's a very good question, Supervisor Euler. Our number of chronic homeless was less than 17%, about 16.6% in the 2017 survey.
And
previously, it was almost 40%.
40%, if I recall.
But to make it very complicated, HUD changed the definition for the 2017 survey. And the definition in 2015, to be chronically homeless, you had to have experienced 12 consecutive months of homelessness or 4 episodes in the past 3 years and or be disabled. They added to the criteria to 4 episodes that those 4 episodes had to total at least 12 months. And so there were a number of individuals that would have 4 episodes, but not total 12 months. So the number was reduced, and we were not able to sort out a comparison between the old criteria and the new criteria. You know, our general anecdotal, we think the chronic number was reduced, but we're not really sure to what level.
And if I could jump in, Supervisor Giller, my understanding is we're going to be going to an annual count, and is that correct? And that we are going to use the new criteria for that count?
That's correct. Our next count will take place in mid-January 2018 in the new year.
So we should be able at that point to at least start to get some comparative criteria.
That's correct. And we will be moving to annual counts. We're only required to do it every 2 years, but in our county, our continuum of care has decided it's an important number. Evaluation's difficult, but we need as much information as we can gather, so we're going to be conducting that every year.
Okay. I would just chime in. I think the number has definitely dropped on the chronic. You see that in terms of the housing placements, and some of those were the individuals that were the high contact, both with law enforcement, emergency room, into the shelter system. How much, it's hard to, how much is the artifact of the change and how much is real? But the reason why it hasn't gone up, many other cities, those numbers actually went up, even though the definition became tighter. Yours didn't, and that's why there is a real reduction. How much would be hard to pinpoint, but you can look at other cities and see the number actually go in the reverse, even though the criteria. So intuitively, that makes you drop how much you don't know.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for any of the presenters before we open it up to the public? Jeff, I have one just additional, it's not really a question, it's a clarification before we open it to the public. And again, just to remind folks, if you want to comment on this, out in the lobby is, I don't know who it is, I'm sure it's a very nice human being with a, who is it?
Heidi.
Heidi, it's Heidi. Out in the lobby, if you want to comment, she has comment cards with numbers on them, and that's probably the most efficient way to do this. My question, what was my question? I've lost it now. This is the problem with going. Oh yeah, a clarification. You mentioned that in late winter, I believe we're going to be going out for new proposal to operate the shelter. Can you explain just a little bit more how that process works and what that looks like and the genesis of that?
Yes. So we'll be moving forward with working with our local procurement to issue an RFP to identify any potential operator that would be interested.
And can you explain what an RFP is for those who don't speak government?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Supervisor. Request for proposals.
Okay.
And looking for any potential organization that has interest in running the shelter. The current contract with Volunteers of America expires at the end of June of next year. So we will be going through this process. It would typically take 6 to 8 weeks. So we anticipate coming back to your board probably in early April, and sharing the results of the RFP process and making a recommendation to you regarding a shelter operator. Regarding the genesis of the desire to go out with an RFP, when your board approved the last contract with Volunteers of America, your board also recommended that we conduct an RFP process to see if there were any other potentially interested parties in operating the shelter in the upcoming year.
Okay, so any of the folks, Placer Rescue Mission, Gathering In, Teen Challenge up in Immigrant Gap could theoretically compete with this RFP process?
Yes, they will compete. We are going to be sharing information, working with procurement. And if there's any interested party or someone knows of an interested party, we would appreciate that information, and we will make sure that they get notice when the RFP is issued so that they have the opportunity to participate in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question. What is the estimated cost for this process?
I would actually have to refer that to procurement. I'm not sure they're here tonight. I'm not sure if there's any other county staff that has an idea of what it costs. There is a cost, though, associated. It's a fairly comprehensive process. We usually get panel members involved that are experts. We'll get people coming in from other counties to actually sit on panels, review all of the proposals, make recommendations. And it takes a considerable amount of time from the procurement person that's assigned to manage the project.
And I appreciate that very much. And as I said before, Jen, I'll walk with you down this road this one time, but I probably won't be supportive if it comes up again. So just so you know.
Okay, we will walk this road together for however long we walk. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to open this up to the public. If you grabbed a comment card, it should say something like Group 1 on it. If you are in Group 1, please line up right there where Beverly is standing behind the podium here. And we'll just take, you don't have to be Group 1, number 1, just if you're Group 1, line up, and we'll just take you as you come. Welcome, and please give us your name and your residence, either specifically or generally.
Good evening, Chairwoman Montgomery and board members. Wayne Nader. I live in North Auburn, about a 5-minute walk from here. So I've certainly experienced this evolution, I would call it. First, I would like to say that I made some comments about a year ago that I think were not helpful to this process, this difficult and growing issue. And and I may have offended some people, so I want to apologize first for those comments. One thing that I've been doing over the last year in particular is really taking a close look at this situation, because it is very troubling for our community. I know most of the people probably in this room wish it would just go away, but it won't. It's going to get worse, I'm afraid, over time when we're talking about numbers. Just economics are going to drive that, unfortunately. But I think I'm pleased to see the numbers that the county is accomplishing. And as I said, over the last year, what I've really seen is, again, I've lived in this part of Auburn for about 5 years. So I've seen it go from awful to better. And is it working great? Well, no, there's still things that need to be done, but I think the path is set for the right direction. There are two critical elements to me to making this work, and I think some of them are already now starting to be engaged in this process. And that is, I believe in tough love. And that is asking accountability and responsibility of anybody who accesses the services of the county. They should be evaluated as they come in. If they have addiction issues, if they're just homeless because of economic issues, they have to be addressed in a different form. And I think it's critical that we identify those and then set up kind of almost like a work plan for them over a 30, 60, 90, maybe 120 days, and saying this is what you need to accomplish. And I think when we put that kind of accountability in, we can really see some progress. The other thing that I've seen that's critical and it's starting to move forward is the policing element. I think if you have two of those and they're functioning really well, I think you can get tremendous progress on this issue. And I would encourage that as we continue to move forward on this, that those be implemented very clearly as we try to deal with this issue, because it isn't going to go away. I mean, we can't just say no shelters because they're back in the street. Is that an answer to the problem? No, it's not an answer. It just exacerbates the problem. And I understand the sensitivity in the community to having it there, but we've got to come up with a solution, and it's going to have to be somewhere where we can try to minimize the impact, as Ken went over, but there's still going to be an impact, and I think the community needs to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that was perfect timing on your 3 minutes. Wow. Welcome.
Hi there. My name is Mary Schmidt. I live in Plaster County, lived here for 20 years, and now live in Rockland. I used to work for EMQ, which merged with Families First. I was an advocate for families with teenagers with mentally and emotionally troubled. I'm now retired, and I'm a CASA volunteer for foster children. I am opposed to having a large homeless shelter built anywhere. I don't believe large, and the word is large, shelters serve the homeless effectively. The proposed shelter is to be similar to the Orange County Rescue Mission, which, despite being given land, buildings, and loans that don't need to be paid back by the government, they still need $11 million a year to operate. And they want us to have one even bigger, is my understanding, to have 400 beds. And the one in Orange County, I believe, has 200, although they do have other outreach programs as well. They also require Christian classes, and I don't think a tax-funded, and it is tax-funded because those are governments giving them money. There's 6 entities, cities and counties, 2 counties and 4 different cities in Los Angeles, yes, that give money to Orange County, that have given them loans that don't have to be paid back, and land. I mean, we know this. Don't pretend like it doesn't exist. The homeless shelters, if you Google it, you see a lot of quotes from homeless people and why they don't go to homeless shelters. Again, if you read that, you find there's a large percentage of people that are homeless that stay away from the shelters, and I mean large shelters, because they have a fear of crowds, especially the mentally ill. They have a fear of other mentally ill. They have a fear of being assaulted and raped. There are lice, scabies, bed bugs and diseases, lack of privacy, theft of belongings, especially their shoes. David Pirtle, a homeless person on the Talk of the Nation show, said there's a lot of good shelters, but there are a lot of big warehouses that are not safe. If you have a lot of people with a lot of problems, put them together, you have one big problem. I am a fan of smaller shelters where people can focus on help. I believe the Gathering Inn does provide this and provides the services and is much more personal than the large ones. I don't think we need to fix what's not broken. I don't think shelters reduce the number of homelessness, only homes do. In July of 2017, on the Slate website, entitled Downtown Homeless Shelters Are Disappearing, federal aid for emergency and transitional housing fell from $430 million in 2010 to $172 million in 2015. Federal funding is tilted in one direction, finding permanent housing for chronically homeless. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know that we gave out cards for everybody in Group 1, so there should be 12 people who have a card that says Group 1 on it. So look at your card. If it says Group 1, please line up behind the lady in the very nice black and white jacket. Unless you've decided you don't want to speak. All right, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Susie Tronti, and I live in North Auburn. First of all, I'd like to say I'm not sure why you feel the need to fly somebody from Florida to do a 3-day tour of Auburn to determine what we residents could already tell you and have told you over and over again. Sacramento Steps Forward concluded that there should be permanent supported housing for chronic homeless. Some of the housing will include at 319 Main Street in Roseville, 19 apartments, and share housing at Lake Arthur. What I want to know is, will these people be drug tested and alcohol tested to ensure sober living, or will we be once again enabling the addict with our taxpayer dollars? Also, when you talk about moving homeless, like 40-some homeless, from the shelter, I know for a fact that there's a mobile home park off of I-80 and Bowman area. Actually, I think it's Lincoln, when you get off the freeway. And they're moving them over there, and the people that live there say it's been nothing but problems over there. Okay, then I also want to know, will rent subsidy clients be drug and alcohol tested, as well as, or will we be also enabling their addiction by subsidizing their habit? Regarding permanent housing for homeless, do they get pushed to the front of the line? Are homeless considered a preference, as I just heard earlier? There is a long wait list for so many sober, law-abiding citizens that actually have jobs but not enough money to cover rent. In my opinion, those should be where they are in line, and nobody should be pushed to the front of the line for bad behavior. I understand that there are homeless that don't have bad behavior, but what we mostly see around here is a lot of really bad behavior, and I don't think those people should be entitled to anything. Regarding the shelter in Tahoe, that is only to be a seasonal warming shelter. Why? If a permanent shelter is good enough for Auburn, then it's good enough for Tahoe residents as well. Remember, if you build it, they will come. According to the 2017 count of the foothills from North Penryn, I'm going to skip that. Your conclusion is that only 40.6% of homeless have a substance abuse problem is ridiculous and inaccurate. Listen to the scanner every day and you will realize that most of the crime-related calls are due to intoxicating vagrants, and vagrants seem to be everywhere. The recidivism rate is extremely costly. So when you say keeping these people out of jail is much more effective, we have a high recidivism rate, and it's costly to taxpayers and to potential victims and other victims. I would like to see you give any interest in private parties a chance to contract to run the North Auburn shelter. Volunteers of America has been a complete failure and has lacked transparency for our citizens. The shelter is not successful, and if the same people are still running it over 2 years when the maximum time is allowed, there's 180 days. If there's an inmate, people are staying over the 180 days. Inmates use it like a revolving door. And I also forgot to bring the picture, but I have a picture of a sex registrant, a 290 sex registrant, who I have a snapshot of him in the shelter. I want to know, why is he in the shelter when they're not even supposed to be in the shelter? Okay?
Thank you. Welcome. Please come forward.
Hi, good evening. My name's Leandra Marquez. I'm a Rockland resident. I've lived in Placer County for over 20 years. I work in the county of Sacramento. I've worked there and within the city for the past 28 years. I've watched the degradation of the county I work in, the city, over the past several years due to the homeless and transient population, and it's become unbelievable. I actually work adjacent to the VOA, and I can tell you on a daily basis it's nothing but drug dealing, public intoxication, a series of loitering, homelessness, and I would invite each and every one of you to come down to 12th and North C Street if you haven't seen the reality of what a large shelter brings. I'm here to oppose a large-scale shelter within my county. I don't want to see panhandlers on every block holding signs. This 12%, I'm thoroughly convinced, is a low number because we don't cater to it here in Placer County, much like the criminal element that the district attorney has a very harsh penalty for. I've heard many people talk about the reasons they stay in Sacramento. It's because it's lucrative to commit crime and to get away with your bad behavior. I don't want to see that here in Placer County. I can also tell you that as a result of a large-scale shelter, you will see a relocation of a number of persons from the county I work in coming here to do business. There's a lot of opportunity here. Things are given to them, and I have some extreme concerns over the quality of life that I pay as a taxpayer to not have to put up with in my personal life. I do that every day in my job. Again, I believe there will be more blight, crime increase, theft of vandalism, panhandling, drug activity. This is also an extreme burden on law enforcement. It sounds like you just had to hire POP officers to have to move homeless encampments and sites, but the fact of the matter is there are sometimes people just have to go to jail. Those people that are serial inebriants, people that have ongoing criminal issues and don't seem to get the message, they're going to have to go to jail to have some kind of a court-mandated opportunity to where they can't return to the areas where they're victimizing other people. So, again, that's pretty much all I have to say. I am vehemently opposed to that within the county or the city that I live in, and that's all I got to say.
Thank you very much. Please come forward. Come forward. Don't be shy. Come forward when the next person steps away.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
And, other Board of Supervisors. My name is William DeVore. I live in the city of Rockland. I've lived there for 26 years. I also have over 30 years experience in human services, both as a professional, administrator, and a manager. I'm here tonight to say that I am not in support of the development of a very large homeless shelter on a portion of the county-owned property located at 4242 Cincinnati Avenue in Rockland. However, I recommend that each Board of Supervisor conduct town hall meetings within their respective district in South Placer County before deciding on the need and direction to take for expanded homeless shelter services in South Placer County. These town hall meetings within the communities of Rockland, Roseville, and Lincoln would help to educate, engage, and solicit feedback and recommendations from local residents, businesses, and city council members about the work, findings, and recommendations of the South Placer 24/7 Shelter and Services Planning Group, as well as efforts to better coordinate existing homeless and safety net services. Additionally, if any county-owned land is used for a homeless shelter, especially if it is leased long-term to a private nonprofit entity, organization entity, for a nominal amount of money, local citizens and businesses, city councils, and the Placer County Board of Supervisors must have the final say in the type of program that is developed. I know that there are no easy solutions to address homeless problems within Placer County, although based on the presentation tonight, we're doing pretty darn well. However, it is my belief that we all need to be thoughtful, transparent, and collaborative in finding viable solutions that reflect the magnitude of the homeless problem in each local community within Placer County. Without good programming and very close monitoring, any homeless program that is established will be a disaster for the residents of Placer County. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Looks like we've got the last two folks in Group 1. If you have a card that says Group 2, please line up behind these nice ladies. And Group 2, take a look at your card. Come on forward. Welcome.
Welcome. My name is Denise Dirks. I'm a local attorney. I've had my business in Placer County for 28 years. I'm also a resident of Rockland. One thing I noticed in the Marbut study was that he did not look at Rockland, Lincoln, or Sheridan. That was not a part of his study at all. And there was a proposal, or at least somewhat of a proposal, to put this big mega shelter, whether they call it a mission or a shelter, it has the same purpose, in our backyard. I also don't appreciate being called a NIMBY, because I think any time that you call somebody names, it is derogatory. I don't want this shelter 1 mile from my office, or 2.5 miles from my home, or 2 miles from my children's schools. It's too big for our county. We don't need it. We need to study this better, and we need to have partnerships, not just with the county, but with the cities and with the unincorporated areas as well. I note that in Rockland, we don't have an unincorporated MAC. Maybe we need to look at that. But we do need to have more of a voice in this system, because it is our community. It is important to us, and we do have neighbors that are homeless that we care about. But we also do not want to create a big homeless shelter where there's going to be more homeless people coming in. If you look at the other examples of the rescue missions, one namely in Eugene, very great idea. They have to drug test, they can't drink, they're 24/7 lockdown unless they need to go to their appointments. But what has happened to Eugene? A lot more homeless has come in, and they don't want to follow the rules. Now they have the biggest rise in chronically homeless in that area. They haven't had that before. So we need to study this a little further, and I'll save my time for somebody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, if you have a card that says Group 2, please line up. Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Sherry Cusick. I'm a 23-year resident of Placer County. I currently live in Rockland, and I agree with not having a large shelter like others. And according to Mr. Marbut's study himself, he indicated because of the size of the county, geographical home affinities, and mobility issues, a single regional facility would likely not work. The term of unincorporated area in Rockland, the facility being out there, makes it sound like it's far, far away from everything. Highway 65 is a barrier. It is not. It's within a mile of businesses and schools. In fact, homeless people can walk under the freeway. They don't even have to follow the road. And then what's going to happen when there's the build-out of Sunset Area Plan, Rockland Ranch? There will be thousands of homes, schools. Sac State's supposed to come out there, Sierra College, I believe Warwick University. It will no longer be unincorporated. The industrial area, as far as it being in the industrial area for jobs, several different people have spoke to the business owners out there. Number one, they were not aware of the shelter coming out. Number two, they were not happy about it at all. As far as employment in that area, according to Placer County's 2017 Community Health Assessment, the majority of workers in Placer County commute by auto, 88%. The average travel time to work is 27 minutes, so I don't know where the jobs are going to be found. Sorry, I had a lot of stuff trying to narrow this down.
All right, take a breath. It's okay.
So as far as if a shelter does come, I have a couple of concerns with Placer Rescue Mission's FAQs. They stated that it's for Placer County residents only, but their most recent, and has been for several months now, though Placer County statute states that you will be a resident for at least 15 days and provide your intent to continue to live in the county, Placer Rescue Mission, and this is in bold caps, Placer Rescue Mission is under no obligation and will not follow that policy. So does that mean you don't have to be a Placer County? It's kind of hard to say, do you not have to be a Placer County resident to live there? As far as background checks, what will happen? Will people be fingerprinted? Will people be breathalyzed, drug tested if they're on probation? Will the probation department be contacted? And if they are not accepted into the facility or kicked out, where do they go? And they will migrate. There is a migration issue. There is an article in the newspaper, I can't remember if the Herald or the Journal, but homeless people were interviewed saying Sac County agencies are transporting them up here saying Placer County has more to offer you. So whoever thinks they will not migrate is not being very reasonable. So we will have a major mess here in our county. We moved here. It's a beautiful family community, safe, clean, and I just don't want it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Mike Bissell. I've been a Weimar resident since 1984. And I would just like to say that because someone is homeless does not mean they are transient. Those terms seem to be used interchangeably, and if one is to believe the findings of Dr. Marbut's study, a majority of the people that are homeless in Plaster County have been homeless, have been here for over 5 years. A lot of these people grew up in this community and continue to be members of this community. So to call them transients is a disservice to them, and I think needlessly stigmatizes them. So if we're going to solve this issue, this problem of homelessness, we need to remember that language matters and not to use the terms transient and homeless interchangeably. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Betsy Bender. I live in the unincorporated area of Placer County on the other side of Dry Creek. Thank you for having us here tonight. I have a couple of just different thoughts from listening to the different presenters this evening. One, and I can, touch base with Jeff afterwards, but in general, I want to put it out there to the board that when we go to RFP, when we go to request a proposal for the vendors to provide services on behalf of our Placer County homeless shelters, that we word it appropriately so that we're not pigeonholing one vendor or two vendors versus multiple vendors. If we write the RFP to be an in-house 24/7 shelter, we exclude the gathering in model as an example. So it's going to be really important how that's worded so that we can have different models presented in our RFP, or we as a county need to decide which model we want before the RFP, which is typically how it works in the RFPs that I've seen in the corporate world. So caution on our part that we need to be open to how that's worded. Second, I love pop. I don't like soda pop, but I love our problem-oriented policing team, our sheriffs. They are absolutely amazing. I've never heard anything other than that. The only reason why I bring it up is our numbers look really good. And the last thing I want is for our pop team to be reduced because our numbers look really good. So for the record, the community understands, and I think you guys understand too, but for the record, I want to just say we need to keep them to keep on the positive track. The other thing is regarding Dr. Marbut, and no disrespect, but Auburn is different. Placer County is different than big city USA and the numbers. And with some of the things that were said, it just didn't sit right with me in our Auburn community. Going and looking at the sites where there used to be camps and there aren't camps there anymore does not necessarily mean that things are better. It means that those people have moved to another location. We still have camps. We still have our officers cleaning up after them. And so we need to recognize that we still have those issues. We're living in this community, and we need to continue to work together to make the major improvements that I think that we've made that we don't want to lose sight of. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Chair Montgomery, Supervisors, nice night for it. I want to thank you all for the hard work.
Would you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, Darling. Will Taylor, Placer Independent Resources Services.
Thank you.
Thank you for the hard work you've done. It's making a difference, clearly. And Supervisor Euler, thank you for pointing it out that homelessness is not a zero-sum game. People come in and out of homelessness all the time. It's very easy to become homeless. You can lose a job. You could experience a catastrophic illness or medical expenses. You could lose a home to foreclosure or get evicted. You may have an untreated mental illness that prevents you from maintaining housing, or an untreated addiction. A consumer we work with at my office, she developed cancer, and she had a choice between, well, let me start by saying she was born and raised in Auburn. She's lived here all her life. And she had to make a choice between doing life-saving treatment, medical treatment, or having a home to die in. She chose to live. Because of her cancer, she couldn't work. She spent her life savings. She spent her retirement. And she ruined her credit rating by to pay her medical bills. She lost her home because she couldn't pay her mortgage. But she survived. She beat her cancer, but she is now homeless. She is one of the homeless people that has been photographed and made fun of on a certain Facebook page. And perhaps our neighbors could get to know a human being instead of stigmatizing them and ridiculing them online. It's her town too. So there are a lot of barriers to renting and maintaining housing, okay? There's a lack of affordable housing. There's, less than 1% vacancy rate in this town. A typical two-bedroom or one-bedroom apartment in Auburn costs $1,200. Some landlords are requiring a person earn up to 3 times that rent amount for to make the rent. That would equal a $22.50 an hour salary. That excludes people with disabilities who are living on disability. It excludes anyone who's working full-time on a minimum wage job. No one who's working full-time should live in poverty or be homeless. So the solutions are pretty straightforward. Build affordable housing, which you're working on. Treat mental and physical health needs, which you're working on. Provide substance use treatment and mental health treatment, which you're doing. If anyone like the Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Board is a great place to learn about the services that are being done here. And we could pay living wages. So thank you all for the hard work you're doing. It's making a difference.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Robin Leffler, and I have been a resident of Rockland for the past 8 years. Before that, I lived in Auburn area. We lived there for about 12 years, and we saw firsthand the difference that the shelter made in Auburn. We lived there from about 1998 until about 2011. So I have some firsthand experience with those differences. Very simply put, the Plaster Rescue Mission is a proposed 24-acre mega mission homeless super shelter in Rockland that we don't want and we feel that we don't need. As a member of Concerned Citizens of South Placer, I am a part of a group of residents who have come together to become more informed about the Placer Rescue Mission and how projects like this have had major negative, even devastating impacts on the communities around them. We have done our homework, we have read the Marbut study, we have looked at the numbers, and we have seen and we feel that the numbers don't add up to support this large of a project in our community. 630 plus currently homeless, we don't feel is adequate or justifies that large of a project. Please go to our website for more info and links, stoptheshelterpcc.com. In a recent survey taken on Nextdoor, 783 responders voted 91% to oppose the building of Placer Rescue Mission in our community. And I ask you, Board of Supervisors, if this number is representative of the larger population of your constituents, which I think it is, then how can you in good conscience be in favor of this shelter? And will you truly represent us by voting for this shelter? Unfortunately, most people, including business owners I've talked to, don't know anything about your planned Rockland shelter. Excuse me. Hopefully that will change as word gets out and people become more informed. They will understand the numbers offer no justification for a shelter of this size in our community, and they will understand that the Kaya component, a come as you are 24/7 component, which Auburn has, will drastically change our city, just like as it has Auburn, and will be a draw for transients from all over the country, as it has in other cities. Is that what you want, and is that what you think that we want? Most emphatically not. We are not against helping the truly homeless, and I and others in our group have worked at Gathering In, Salvation Army, etc., and there are many organizations and agencies already in place to do this. Even Dr. Marbut said that we're doing something right. If we're doing something that right, why do we need this mega shelter to try to fix a problem we don't really have? What we are against is giving continued handouts to professional transients, the majority of whom have mental and/or substance abuse issues, and a come-as-you-are 24/7 shelter of this size in Rockland. To paraphrase Mr. Marbut's words, we need to give a hand up, not a handout, no free food, handouts, cash, or camping equipment to the chronically homeless transients. If the homeless turn down service programs, they should not be enabled. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So excuse me just a moment. So if you have a Group 2 or a Group 3 card, please line up. We're just going to go through by the card numbers, and if you haven't got a card, now is your last opportunity to get one, and we'll be closing the public comment when we're done with people who have cards. So please line up. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Heather Ireland. I'm a 9-year resident of Meadow Vista, and I also want to thank you for all of your work and all that you've put into this, and Mr. Marbut for all he's done. When I came here 9 years ago, I noticed the homeless people standing in the shopping centers with their signs, and it became an issue that I decided to get involved with. And I got involved with this issue when a resident of Placer County, Gary Mappa, and put together a group called the Auburn Homeless Forum, and this is where we all discussed our concerns about homelessness and the need for a shelter. And then, it was wonderful when a shelter actually came into being. And I have to say that, I've gotten to know a good many of the homeless people as human beings, and I agree with this man up front who said they are not transients. Transient is a word that objectifies. It's more like an object. It's like giving someone a number. These are people. These are homeless human beings, not transients. And I would urge people to stop using that word as well. And I have come to see in my work as an advocate, which is what I have become for these people, I've helped many of these people and have seen firsthand what the obstacles are for them getting out of homelessness. And one of them is, even though the shelter is a wonderful thing for them to be off the street at night, which is, if they weren't at the shelter, I guarantee it, the situation would be much worse. They would be out there in the street as they were before with the camp. They have to sleep somewhere. But unfortunately, some of the people that have need more help than what they can get at the shelter is not available to them. Sometimes the services are out of the area. They might have to go to Roseville. So I want to just clarify, this shelter that everyone's talking about is going to be a campus, and I read about this, and it's going to be a closed campus, so it's not like people coming and going. It appears to me to be a program where these services that they need to help them get off of drugs, off of alcohol, and to better themselves, including getting schooling, is what it talked about, really helping them get the life skills that they need so that they don't just, flit from one place to another and miss appointments and all kinds of things. I think that people are misunderstanding what this is going to be. It's not going to be like downtown loaves and fishes where they're all hanging around. Go back and read what it says. It says it's going to be a closed campus. It's going to be a program that's going to provide for people to learn the skills and to get through what they need to do to get out of homelessness. And I think it's going to be a big service to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to, I did last call, so we're going to close comments with the gentleman in the suit and the glasses at the back of the line, and then we'll bring it back to the board for additional comments and questions. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And that was my wonderful mom.
That was your mom. Oh,
Yes,
how
it was.
sweet.
My name is Christian Ireland. I come here today as a member of the community, just like you all. Hello, friends. This is an issue that not only occurs in Placer County area, but also statewide, nationwide, worldwide. This is not a new problem. I see there's much frustration, condemnation, even some anger about our homeless population. Let's take a moment to think about this just for a moment. We are the lucky ones here. We have jobs, we have an income, a place to call home with a roof over our heads. Homeless live by very difficult lives, and the vast majority do not choose to live like this, but rather made bad decisions in life, probably had less than ideal childhood, yet we want to discard them like trash or even stray animals. Do you realize they are just trying to survive? If you want to kick them out of your city, your community, do they lose any value as fellow human beings in your eyes? What if we come from a place of empathy instead of condemnation, from understanding instead of ignorance? How much more effective can we be as a community with our homeless population? I don't have all the answers, what exactly we need to do about the homeless, but I do know many of us here are coming from the wrong mindset, and that will not solve the problem we have here, only exacerbate it. If we come together with as much passion and resolve to properly address the issue of homelessness, but with love instead of hate, what a difference we can make then. Just imagine that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair Montgomery, Supervisors. I'm Bonnie Gore, the Vice Mayor of the City of Roseville. And I'm just coming here this evening to share a little bit of perspective on the city's behalf. And first of all, I want to say thank you for the work that you have done to this point. It is certainly a challenging issue that the county has to address homelessness. That is your charge as the county, and it's a challenging issue. You've made a lot of good work, and it's evident that it's a multi-pronged approach. There's not one solution, but it's certainly an issue that we've got human beings who have to be taken care of, and their concerns addressed, as many of them are our residents. I think I understand that there's been a feasibility study for the Plaster Rescue Mission, money set aside to do that, $44,000, I believe. I think it would be really important, as these homeless in the South Placer area live in our cities. They live in Roseville and Rockland and Lincoln. I think it's really important that the local jurisdictions have the opportunity to have some input and participate with the county on these discussions, because these folks live in our cities and affect our cities and our services as well as the county. And so what I'm coming to you asking is, I want to make sure that we work together with our local jurisdictions to have input on what ends up happening in South Placer County. It's a tough decision, but I want to make sure that we all have an opportunity to represent the residents in our communities as well as the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much for having us here tonight. Thank you to all of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Jenny Davidson. I am a North Auburn resident. I'm also the Vice President of the Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras, and so I'm here with that hat, as well as I am the CEO of Stand Up Plaster, serving survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and sex trafficking here in our community. And so we also operate a safe house and an extended housing program there. So just a little bit about the Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras. I heard it mentioned a couple times, but just to sort of give people a little bit of backstory. You have at least over 20 different nonprofits who and different jurisdiction leaders who come together every month and work really collaboratively on looking for solutions and looking for ways to recognize this issue is happening right here in our community and how can we work together. I think it's really fantastic testimony to our county how closely all of the nonprofits really do work together. The Plaster Collaborative Network named the Roseville Homeless Response Team as their collaboration of the year, and Stand Up Plaster is very proud to be part of that. So are a lot of the agencies in this room. So there's a lot of great collaboration going on. And then with my other hat as the CEO of Stand Up Plaster, I just want to mention, I feel like a lot of people are really othering this population. It's easier to talk about them as the homeless and to forget that they're people. They're people who went to elementary school with our kids and who went to high school with our kids. They might have done Boy Scouts with our sons and Girl Scouts with our daughters, and then they went through something that brought them to the place that they're at right now. And so for one, I just really want to recognize that we're we're talking about human lives and people in our communities when we're talking about this issue. As far as Stand Up Plaster, we serve survivors of violence, and I think that a lot of people are really afraid of this homeless population because they haven't gotten out to get to know the people, the different individuals, and they're afraid. And there's this stranger danger thing that we've all been conditioned to feel like is a real thing. In my 20 years in my line of work, I have only had one client of a sexual assault who I interacted with who was sexually assaulted by a stranger. It's the people who we know, it's the people who we trust. And in sex trafficking, we're dealing with that as a really huge issue in our community right now. And those are mostly the perpetrators, the Johns there, are mostly upper to middle to upper class white men who come from the nice homes. And so being homed or homeless is not a determining factor of whether or not you're going to harm somebody. The number one cause of death for pregnant women is murder by their significant other. And so, you know, there are these statistics that are real about the people who we know and trust. And we can build ourselves up thinking that our homes are safe, and it's the people out there that are dangerous to us. And that's not necessarily the case. And so I just really want I want to encourage people to get to know your nonprofit, see how you can help the nonprofits with the work that's being done, work on affordable housing, and just know that there's a lot of fantastic work that's still being done here in Plaster County. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Euler.
Just really quickly, to Vice Mayor Gore's comment about getting the feasibility study out to the cities, where are we in that?
So what we have, currently we have a draft preliminary study that was done. We typically get a final study done before we release it because it usually causes a lot of confusion when we have drafts out. There was a lot of interest on this, so we have released the draft to your board, and I believe at least the city of Rockland, who made a specific request for it. Right. We'll be happy to share that. I want to caution, it is a draft report now. It will go through changes. Ideally, we would wait till the final comes out and make that available to everybody to view.
Okay, thank you. Just want to check on that.
I'd also like to just clarify for the record that feasibility study is actually a study that was contracted, although we did contribute money. Mm-hmm. It's actually a feasibility study that's been prepared for PRM. It's not a county feasibility study. We are obviously commenting on it, but it is not ours.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment that we had those discussions today with legal counsel with regards to the release of the document. It's obviously not our document technically, but in all fairness, because we did pay for some of that, legal counsel thought that it would be prudent to go ahead and release the 16-page summary. And then the rest of it is basically 800 pages of data. So if those of you that want to come up to the clerk's office and go through 800 pages of data, you're welcome to do that. Thank you.
And actually, just to clarify, the 800 pages can be viewed at the Department of Facility Services. That's where that is housed, and we can have the 16-page narrative that is, again, in draft form available.
That is correct.
Hi, my name is Kiara Donahue. I live in North Auburn. I actually wasn't going to speak tonight or ever again in public, but I felt compelled after I heard the magical mystery tour, with all due respect, that you took through Auburn. I don't know where you shopped or where you went, sir, but it's not indicative of anything that I see, and it certainly isn't indicative of at least 1 or 2 hours on any given day on any scanner app. So I would encourage all of you to not hinge such a big decision on this one report, because the numbers just don't add up to anything that anyone sees as a resident, regardless of where you stand on the homeless issue. And my second is to echo what Ms. Bender said in terms of the RFP. I think that it should be made very transparent and very public so that we all know where that is in the process, what that looks like. And for those of us who think that maybe more than one avenue should be examined, I'd like to know, I'd like to be able to go on the website and see where we are in that process. And that's all I have.
I'd like to wait for Ms. Montgomery to return before I speak, but I would like to put a Public Records Request Act in for the complete 816 pages of that study in a digital format, please. So, if someone wants to speak.
I can speak, Scott, while you wait for Kim. Hi, my name is Denise Harbin, and I'm a North Auburn resident. And my question for you is, why is the board only considering an emergency shelter? Why aren't we talking about transitional housing instead of an emergency shelter? Transitional housing where residents can stay 2 weeks to 2 years, statistically they have a much greater success rate in stabilizing their life and getting employment and becoming self-sufficient. For the millions of dollars that we're going to be spending on emergency shelter, we could go buy some hotels, we could make studio apartments, and you could have 80 people who could become self-sufficient instead of telling them to pack up every single morning. So I'm asking, why doesn't the RFP look at doing transitional housing instead of emergency shelter? So I'd like to use the rest of my 2 minutes for you guys to tell us about what's going on with transitional housing.
Would you like me to respond to that, Supervisor Holmes? So the county does support some transitional housing in the community. I think what we recognize is that we need a full continuum of care to move people ultimately into recovery and to permanent housing. And there is a role for shelters. We don't see shelters as the end-all. Quite frankly, we see permanent housing, not transitional housing, as the end-all.
Right.
But and as you probably noticed from our slide, it looks like we'll have almost, within the next 12 months, if the Meta project goes through, we'll have added 50 units in a year. And we're going to continue to move a focus on permanent housing. In terms of transitional housing, HUD does not prioritize transitional housing anymore, so funding is very, very difficult. But nevertheless, we feel like there's a place in the continuum for it. And so I think it's, when we're looking at housing options, we look at all options. One thing you might have noticed is we're also funding board and cares, because some of the individuals we work with are disabled, and they're going to have a very difficult time to be fully independent. Beyond that, some of the people we put in permanent housing, it's supportive housing. So we make a commitment to provide those services during that person's lifetime, particularly for those individuals that are seriously mentally ill. But if the question is, should we prioritize transitional housing over shelter, I think there's a need for both.
No, I'd agree. But if you look at, when you're talking about what would be in board and care, you wouldn't typically see those people in the emergency 24-hour shelter. You'd see those people.
We actually have a great number of people in the shelter that are really more appropriate for a board and care. So, and then we have some people that are very appropriate for room and board. So each individual, we try to look at what are the best options. Some individuals work well in shared housing, and some people really need their own unit. And so we try to take that into consideration, and we have the housing coordinators working with people on an individual level to see what's available, see what we think is the best fit. You know, our goal is to put people into permanent housing, not have to move them, because if we put them in a situation that's really set up for failure.
And I'm going to suggest that we keep moving through the commenters, and then at the end of all the comments, the board can ask you guys to address anything that's come up that we would like additional follow-up on.
Yeah. I requested that my time be used to talk about that.
Thank you. All right. Please come forward.
What an interesting night. I swear sometimes I felt like I was watching Nancy Pelosi interview Ms. Clinton. But whatever. I tell you, Dr. Marbo sure said one thing that was right.
Sorry, would you introduce yourself?
Scott Holbrook.
Thank you.
If you do the wrong thing, populations will artificially increase, so will the level of crime and violence. That's obviously happened. It started out, the SDA was a big part of that. The Seventh-day Adventist Church with their uncontrolled free clinics, free giveaways. Even they had to close down some of their programs and apologize because of the dangerous transients that have come into our community from elsewhere. I challenge anyone to go into that homeless shelter and show everybody, hide the names, I don't care, their true history, where they've come from, how long they've been here. My wife was a probation officer. She worked at the jail for over 2 years doing all the releases. They are not Auburn homeless. You look at those numbers, how convenient. Let's skip the Auburn area. You look at those numbers they put up, our populations are higher than Sacramento's. This is a semi-rural community. Yes, we have a jail. Yes, AB 109, Prop 47. You know, yeah, there's less felonies because, hey, the great voters of California have decided, let's get rid of those felonies and make them misdemeanors. Doesn't change anything. I'm an elected official. I serve on the Auburn Recreation District. We have never, ever, ever had more homeless encampments. In the past 5 days, we cleared out 5 of them. They're headlines in the paper right across the street. VOA, man, come on. Dr. Marbot was at a meeting up at the Ridge telling everybody how great that management was. Leo did nothing. It wasn't until I and another person contacted National VOA that something was done. VOA is so incompetent, they'll put a little Girl Scouts in there. Oh, look at how good we are. BS. Act like true representatives of us. Ask the tough questions. You talk about swamps. It's scary that it's hitting our little county.
Welcome.
Welcome. Hi, I'm Seth Collier. I live here in North Auburn. I work here in North Auburn. I am also currently staying at the Auburn shelter to get my life back together. If it was not for VOA or Right Hand Auburn, I don't know where I would be to this day. But they have helped me get on track to get my high school diploma, helped me find work, and get my life back together. And I thank Beth Valentine and VOA for everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. My name is James Croce, and I'm a North Auburn resident here. And that emotional appeal, you know, I'm just going to talk off the top of my head because that's what's going to happen right now, and it's going to be good. Because I want to tell you that my wife and I got to address everybody here, my wife and I, on a shoestring budget, compelled by faces of real individuals going through this transition of being on drugs, going through programs, and at the end of the program, that's it. They're put out in the street. They got nowhere to go except back to the shelter, which and they do their best to do that. My wife and I, on a shoestring, put together purpose-driven properties, and we started a transitional house here in Auburn. We have 5 of those people that transitioned from the shelter that went through our program. 1 has graduated, and what graduation means is they realize they shouldn't be taken from the services, and they need to get out on their own and get a job. And we have a very tightly run facility where they have to work, where they're drug tested, and we believe that we're making a difference. Now, obviously, it's a huge program, a huge problem that's being addressed, and just our little program is not going to solve the whole thing, but it's one little starfish in the sea that we're saving through the little program that we've got going. And so I wanted to address that transitional comment that there is things that can be done on a small level that can make a big impact for our city.
Thank you. And I love your metaphor. Welcome.
Good evening, Supervisors. I'm Antonio Valdez with Legal Services in Northern California. I am an attorney with our Social Security Disability Program. So what I do is try to get folks on Social Security Disability, or SSI, and funded through the county. As a result of our program, we've recovered tens of thousands of dollars for the GA program, as well as hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being brought in through lump sums by clients we've been successful on getting on benefits. Now, many of my clients were referred or came from the shelter, and I don't know how many of them would have been able to get attached to our services and have the funds to get housing, to get their life back together. A lot of people getting attached to the employment services with Social Security and getting jobs and not having to rely on government benefits. And so the shelter is an important tool of the coordinated services that all the reports have been done and the success that has occurred. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to take these last 4 people, and then we're going to close public comment and bring it back to the board.
Good evening. I'm Joe Offer. I live in Applegate, but I'm here in North Auburn almost every day, and I've lived in the area for 15 years now. I'm retired, and I do a lot of volunteer work. I'm annoyed by the presence of homeless people in this area. It's been a problem in this area for the whole time I've been in the area. I think we all agree it's a problem. We can either complain about it, try to wish it away, think we can put people on a bus and ship them someplace else, or we can deal with the problem. And I think that Placer County has made an extraordinary effort to deal with the problem of homelessness. I think I go visit the shelter about once every 2 months. I've served meals there. I've sat down and eaten meals with the homeless people. I've led a prayer session there once or twice. The people are nice. They're working hard to heal their problems, to find employment, to make themselves ready for permanent housing. The staff of Volunteers of America is doing a good job. The county staff is extraordinary, and they've been really working hard to solve this problem from many different aspects, from finding temporary shelter, from finding transitional housing, and for finding permanent housing. We're doing a good job, and we need to be proud of ourselves. And I'd like to thank everybody who's worked hard on this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Brian Norris, and I appreciate what Joe said. I just want to say that I've been to the shelter also and fed there, and not to placate, but I think food's a great equalizer, and I think in regards of any situation that you're going to have a good experience with the food. So with that said, not to placate that, it's nice to see Dr. Marbut here. I'm interested in to know from him in regards to, like, was it about 600 people that you contacted when you guys did the report, if I'm correct? And it was about 95, 97 of those people were the ones that filled out the questionnaire, if I'm correct. So did we base our findings on that right there, like that's 15 to 17% in regards to the recommendations made for the shelter? I mean, if I could ask that question.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question.
My question would be, you can answer after I'm done, but in regards to like when we did the survey.
The initial study?
Initial study.
Okay. 600
people contacted, like maybe 95, 97, if I'm correct, like filled out the survey with it. And so we based on a small percentage instead of like, I know all 600 wouldn't fill out the survey, but I think it'd be more indicative if that's where my question's wrong. I'll hold off to that at the end.
We'll wait for all the comments and then we'll.
The other thing I'd say is I'm really encouraged to see here residents from Rockland here that are concerned about the probability of a shelter in that area, and would encourage, like the one gentleman said, for Robert and for Kurt and for Jennifer, for Jim and for Jack, to actually hold some town meetings in your area. I think that'd be really encouraging in your immediate area. I just think the feedback you would get and comments would be good. There still needs to be more contact here and reach out. I do think that we also, in regards to the studies, that we can skew the numbers any way we want to see what we want to see. I think that, and I'll say this, I think that homelessness and transient has become a big money maker, and I think that on both sides of the aisle, and I think that it does make it a challenge in regards. I think cities are dealing with that, but I just think that we have to be really cautious in regards to how we go forward in regards. I don't know how many more studies we need. I don't know how much more research we need, this and that. We just need to make some tougher decisions. We need to give our law enforcement more teeth to actually treat those that were felonies before and not now. You talk to anybody that works in Placer County, not anybody, but nobody on record will come up and say, hey, we're busy as hell. We have so much going on that we can't even deal with it. We're seeing people that we've never seen before. Now, there are people here that I think have been here for a really long time, and I think that homeless and transient. I think that's been around. But I do think that there has been some enabling of that in regards to, like, we treat it as a separate segment of society, even though it is in some respects, but it's not. I mean, they are all part of us. We're all human beings, but I think that it's not a special class of citizen. I think that they're just like any of us, and that as we get services and help them, that they can get back in society. So I'll leave it at that. So
if I can respond just real quick. I agree with you 100% to with regards to the public outreach and all that stuff. I have been more than willing to talk to any folks that want to talk about what the county is doing vis-a-vis its program that we talked tonight, as well as the agreement with PRM. Now, what's difficult, all right, is to have those discussions because there is no project right now, all right? Permits have not been pulled. When that happens, that triggers that public outreach to where everybody can get their pound of flesh, if you will, and talk about those things. But as I sit here today, I routinely communicate with folks in Rockland. As a matter of fact, I talked to 2 city councilmen members today. I talked to the folks in Roseville. I talked to the folks in Lincoln, and hold discussions about where the county is in these particular processes. There's a ton of misinformation out there. I've thrown myself out there and said I'll even talk to the folks that oppose it, but they don't want to talk to me and they don't want to hear about it. So, if they ever want to, my office is open to talk about what I know.
Can I ask one follow-up question to you?
Of course, go right ahead.
In regards to about a year ago, we came here we were talking in the meeting, and we found out that what had happened is that the county had actually kind of like stopped looking for a place to go. That was a MAC meeting here. We heard that the county wasn't looking like they were looking before, like we thought, for a place for the shelter to be. Found out that the reason that had stopped was because Roseville was doing its own study. Is that true?
Well, Roseville, what had happened is that there was a delay in the sequencing of what we were supposed to be doing, all right?
Okay.
Roseville went ahead and they did a study through, I think it was Sacramento Steps Forward. They spent $50,000 and they found out the same data that Dr. Marbut gave us. So that's a waste of $50,000.
Okay.
But the sequencing of what we were doing was moving forward towards figuring out what we were going to do for the long term. After we had a couple more months pass from that, we decided as a board, I think it was, a year ago, to continue to move forward on the opportunities in Auburn.
Okay.
So that's how that happened.
Thank you for your time. I will say you guys really need to hold those town meetings. Be a good thing.
Thank you, Brian.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the board. My name is Bridget Barnes. I'm a land use attorney, and I'm still the president of Right Hand Auburn. The reason I wanted to step up here is twofold, actually. One of which is we don't have any opinion, pro or con, on the proposed design for PRM, except that I would like to offer a couple of thoughts, having gone through a lot of blood and gore and suffering with everybody in terms of our existing shelter. The first would just be that what we have done up here with Placer County's help and with VOA is take a tentative concept and the use of a tentative location, starting with very limited services, and gradually expand as permitted by the county and as it became more and more obvious what the needs were. And that has grown to having a little schoolroom in the shelter that has grown to a very integrated, a much more integrated system, I should say, with the county in terms of the services that they're offering on site now than what we had before, and promises through the whole person care grant of even additional. I was really happy to hear recently from staff that we will have a second psychiatrist available, so there'll be somebody up in the North Auburn area who can provide more psychiatric services than we have been able to achieve so far. So one of the things I would mention is that, and it sort of flows with some of the things Mr. Marbut said, as well as Jeff and Ken earlier, having participated in the citizen meetings to try and help figure out if we should have a location, it's critically important, I think, that the board provide direction, because in the meetings, what was clear was that all of the goals of the citizens and all of the goals of what usually is a classic location for homeless cannot be met on the same criteria. And so a prioritizing of those goals are going to have to be given so that a decision can be made. And lastly, to ask you, first, not only just to thank you for everything, but to ask you, pretty please, with sugar on top, is if we're going to be staying in the same area for any length of time more than another year or so, if we can please have a kitchen. Either allow construction of a kitchen on site or some sort of temporary kitchen. It's very difficult to provide for the 100 a day because it is 3 meals a day now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no idea what you're going to say, but we saved the best for last.
I was
Welcome.
just going to say that. Thank you. I'm Ann Engelbrecht. I'm with Roseville Home Start. The little blurb in Dr. Marbott's report that says we're doing a great job actually refers to Home Start. And so I just thought that, I'd just tell you a little bit about what we're doing and how we do it and why Mr. Marbott said that he could only find one other organization in the entire country, and that's outside Miami, that was better than the way things are being done at Home Start. And I can definitely not take any credit for that, except that if I count the years, I have been there a while. In fact, Leo was on the board when I started there forever ago. But Home Start was the original game in town, met with a lot of resistance from the community. Home Start is a transitional housing program for homeless families. The community was absolutely devastated that this was going to be in their neighborhood. We ended up having to find a way to not only make the community accept what we were doing, but love what we're doing. And I think there's hope as we look at the next steps here in Placer County in getting the community engaged. I hear, people are upset right now, and I think part of it is the fear of the unknown. But I would also encourage you to look at the model that has been highly recommended. If you drive down Riverside now in front of where Home Start is, you would never know that there are 99 beds secretly tucked away. You don't see people out and about that are upsetting the community. In fact, people are shopping up and down there, buying cars for their kids and using the restaurants. So we're right there in the community with 99 beds, and it works amazingly, and we've been there for 20 years. We've had huge success in families moving into permanent housing, the adults having jobs and moving into permanent housing from Home Start. So I just want to encourage everybody, as the night has been long and everybody's tired, that there is hope, and we're going to achieve some great things here in Placer County. But we have to do it together.
Thank you. Okay, I will bring this back to the board now. There were, if we could, someone has the magic button, we could move forward to the, there we go, the important questions. Before we get to the important questions, and I understand that our board may not all have answers to this tonight. Again, we're not taking any particular action. We're giving direction to staff. So my suggestion is that we see if we have any specific questions for staff before we get to these important questions, and then hopefully we can touch on the important questions and try to prioritize some of the suggestions. Robert.
Specific question. We've had this conversation before, but I guess I'm asking for an update and maybe some communication to the audience too. So I've personally had conversations with council members from Lincoln and Rockland and Roseville. I probably have not with Loomis, and I probably should. But I'm of the strong opinion that working together we can do a much better job and get a much better level of results more peacefully than not doing that. And I know staffs have had communication, but I just wanted to reiterate that in public, but also get feedback from staff as to what the current status of communication back from Roseville, Rockland, Lincoln, and Loomis was currently. And I'll give you a specific example. In Lincoln, my hometown, if you will, I'm on the board of a nonprofit called the Wildlife Heritage Foundation, which takes custody of conservation easements on property that is set aside, protected. And I know that the homeless issue in the cities is real in all of them, and it's needs to be dealt with. But in Lincoln specifically, there are significant problems, even as it relates to the habitat value of Auburn Ravine. So with that, I'm just curious as to some staff feedback as to current communications, et cetera.
The level of communication with each city varies. With the city of Roseville, we actually work together on a number of programs. So we have ongoing communication. We both have housing authorities. We actually provide our housing coordinators to work with individuals that have been issued VASH vouchers to try to assist Roseville in helping to locate housing for those individuals. City of Lincoln, the communication is more limited. The South Placer group that meets quarterly to coordinate services, there's usually a representative from the City of Lincoln at that meeting. Usually a representative from Rockland also, in addition to Roseville. And again, the purpose of that meeting is to share updates, to try to better coordinate what we do. The last time we met was probably 3 to 4 months ago. We're due for another meeting relatively soon. So, in terms of some of the nonprofits that work in those areas, we work very closely with the Lighthouse, work very closely with Kids First, work very closely with Plaster Collaborative Network. A lot of nonprofits see and work with homeless individuals and homeless families and children. And so we try to coordinate all of our efforts with those key stakeholders.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I just had a comment to piggyback on that. I think, Robert, the biggest challenge here is what city is going to admit that they've got a homeless problem. That's really the problem. And and I've heard they go to these meetings to talk about the homeless, and nobody really wants to talk about the problem. So I think we need to have a breakthrough discussion about what the problems are and what the numbers are, and finally get that discussion going. It's a hard discussion to have because connected to the answer is money. And the problem's been left at our doorstep to handle. And I'd like to see much more collaboration and cooperation with the cities, but getting them to admit there's a problem is the first step.
I'm going to weigh in on this, and I'll continue to take comments from the board. But Supervisor Holmes and I meet monthly with 2 individuals from the City Council in Auburn, and they're called the 2x2s. It's a really clever name. But one of the things that we talk about consistently and routinely is the interaction between the county and the city, particularly as it relates around issues regarding homelessness. This morning at Medler's, which was at 7 a.m., but seems like it was about 3 weeks ago now, there was Mayor Spokley mentioned that the city of Auburn is going to be creating some kind of task force of their own. So I'm going to suggest that Supervisor Holmes and I continue to work with the 2x2s, maybe pull Jeff into those conversations so that we make sure that we are coordinating our efforts. So Auburn has taken the first step. They've admitted they have a problem, and they've identified the fact that they do want to create a path forward. And so I do think there is some real opportunity to build better relationships and build better collaboration and coordination between all of us, because it's not a challenge that can be solved by one entity. Other comments? Supervisor Holmes?
Yeah, I think in the Marbut study, I think it was quoted that we're doing a good job with our families, homeless families, children, and with our veterans. And I'd like to have a little bit more understanding of where we are with the whole person care program, because it seems like it's working pretty positively. And it's my understanding we had 2 grants, a $20 million grant and a $1 million grant. Where are we with that?
So we call it a $20 million program. That's $10 million of federal funding and $10 million of match over a 4-year operational period. As I mentioned earlier, we have over 100 people enrolled. We have 13 people, Sutter, that have been housed. Sutter Health made a contribution of $1 million to purchase housing that could be utilized for participants. And we put out an RFP, selected AMI Housing to essentially, once we've identified the housing, or they actually helped identify it, to purchase it. It ultimately becomes their housing with a deed restriction for 45 years, that they maintain it as housing for low-income, formerly homeless individuals. AMI has purchased two sites. One is off of Lake Arthur Road in the unincorporated area, and the other site is in Rockland. And when we identified the site in Rockland, we actually, this kind of links to Supervisor Wygant's question. We actually coordinated and informed the city manager in Rockland of the purchase and ensured that the use would be allowed. So we have those two houses purchased, a little over $1 million. We used all of Sutter's money and some additional money in whole person care. We're still in the process of purchasing an 18-unit building with Mental Health Services Act dollars. And so that will provide 18 more units. And that's in escrow. There's some work that's being done to bring that up to code, should be available by the end of January. So we are making strides, and we're going to be moving forward to try to identify additional resources so we can purchase additional permanent housing.
So a good percentage of the homeless population has mental illness. Is that correct?
When we took a subsample of those individuals that completed the survey for the 2017 point in time count, about 38% of the sample were individuals self-identified as having some type of mental health issue.
Alrighty. Well, for my money, what I would like to see, instead of looking at another location, spending money on a piece of property and building a new shelter, I would like us to see us enhance working with AMI, the Advocates for Mentally Ill Housing, and try to buy as many homes up as we can to get the mentally ill out of the homeless shelter and off the street and into, have some kind of security and treatment where they're monitored. So that would be what I would like to see. I'm not in favor, thank you. I'm not in favor of building a homeless shelter, a new homeless shelter anywhere. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the board?
Oh, I was just going to add, just for the record, that I've talked to both several council members at Rockland with regards to the AMI house. And when the first conversation that I had asked Jeff to talk to was Rob Jensen at the City of Roseville, when we talked about the 18 room unit in Roseville. So, we're communicating. So.
Supervisor Euler, did you have something?
I'll defer to
Supervisor Wygant.
To the senior member here.
My comments back to staff. I never pay attention to your questions anyway, so I'm not going to do that. After all these years, I'm going to be consistent. So I'm just going to,
I don't pay attention to your answers. So we're even.
That's true. That's a good observation.
And I told him not to pontificate. So come on, Robert, be brief.
Good luck with that. Let me know how that works out. Wake me up when he's done, would you?
I may never get out of here tonight. Keeping in mind that mental health is relative. So, our comment is that we've been in this business for a long time, but frankly, the issue has emerged and become much more of a high-profile issue than it was when I came to the board 23 years ago. That's just my anecdotal observation. So, and I look at the statistics from across the state and read stories about what's happening in the country. So I'm assuming that it's an issue we're going to have to spend more time and give more attention to if we're going to keep Placer County safe and healthy and our communities are in the best shape they possibly can be. We've long had relationships with people like the Gathering Inn, and I'm aware of those, and I've studied them to some extent, but staff really kind of drives those service deliveries until really we had the North Auburn experience. So I live between Lincoln and Auburn, as you know, and I'll pop up to Auburn, particularly if I'm buying something at Home Depot for the farm. And when the North Auburn homeless issue became high profile, let's say 3 years ago in my mind, I would take the time to drive through our DeWitt Center just to observe it. And Wayne Nader, with whom I grew up in Lincoln, articulated what seemed to be anecdotal to me, but he lives up here, and that is the experience that we've had in North Auburn where we were feeling our way forward, trying to come up with a solution, doing some new stuff, being receptive to proposals made by prospective partners, is such that, in my view, it seems like the conditions are a lot better in North Auburn than they were before we did anything. And I think Wayne concurs with that, and he lives up here. So if that's a template, what strikes me as being some of the key things to success in the adaptive management that we've done include we worked with some good partners to get started. We had a facility that we decided to make available. That was the risk position. We put some money into it. We had to adapt by dramatically improving our community policing. To me, that's a critical component. I think that's extremely important. And I personally like and feel comfortable with the data that reflects that we have a 3-region problem in Plaster County. Obviously, the Lake Tahoe area is separate and distinct from anything down here, but I think Auburn area is distinct enough from the South Placer. So as we go forward, the sizing of whatever facilities and efforts we have, I want to continue to reflect the needs from those communities. I don't want to have any kind of a magnet type of condition. Sounds like wouldn't be very effective anyway, but I think if we go forward with that policy approach, it could help us in a range of ways. And lastly, I'll just finish it. Our model of Plaster Health and Human Services is something that's always intrigued me and something for which I deserve no credit. But it expands on the notion of working more thoroughly with partners in our community. I know that about 40% of our HHS budget is contracting out to nonprofits and other partners, including faith-based partners, which has been kind of a model, certainly in the state of California, for a long time. So if we continue to develop that and try to emphasize a greater working relationship with our cities, setting aside your questions, those are my comments and observations at this point, and I'm sure we're going to be continuing to talk about this as we move forward. So thanks, and I want to thank you for all the good work that you've put into this, and particularly the work that led to, I think, a really good discussion tonight.
Supervisor Euler, did you have anything?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, those of you who have concerns about the existing shelter and are still here, thank you. Because as I'm looking at the empty seats that are out there, unfortunately, most of the seats are vacated by people who got up, spoke at us in fairly angry tones, and then left. So those of you who are concerned about the shelter, its current operation, where it's located, thank you for staying and engaging in this part of the conversation with us. When we first started having this conversation at the board, I was fairly strident on a couple of points, and I'm still as strident on those points. Point number one is people find themselves in the condition of homelessness for a number of reasons. The question I have is, do they want to remain there or do they want to get out of that condition? That's question number one that I have. From there, you have a number of evaluative questions. Are they capable? What level of independent living are they capable of? Do they simply need housing on a temporary basis to reestablish employment? They lost employment, but they're perfectly employable. Those are the best, easiest. Give them that temporary opportunity in some form of housing until they get reestablished in employment and move them on. And then it runs the entire spectrum to those folks who are never going to be independent and living on their own. And so we as a county have two options. We find some place for them, or our gentleman in the back wearing green will. Those are really our options. So number one for me is, all right, what's your state of mind? We find you in a we hope, temporary condition of homelessness. Do you want out? Okay, great. Criteria number two for me has always been, is Placer County your home? I don't want to do anything to create a magnet situation. That said, I'm extremely concerned by some of the comments that I heard tonight about a feasibility study that is being conducted for the south part of the county. What I'm concerned about is this, oh, it's going to be 400 beds and it's going to be 600 beds. You know what? The city of Rockland was established in 1893. It took 124 years to get to 62,000 people. It didn't happen overnight. So if we move forward with some kind of facility in South Placer, obviously it's not going to be a 400-bed facility that just shows up overnight, because that's not the way things get built. That's not the way Rockland got built. It's not the way Stanford Ranch individually got built. Whitney Ranch, you went in, did phase one. As homes were selling and you met a need, you saw more need, and you built another phase. If the original homes didn't sell, no other phase would have been built. It will be the same thing with this facility. But if we are controlling it to our population, we're not creating a magnet. We're addressing the needs of our population. And so my comments to staff are going to be, I think we have an obligation ourselves to do a better job of assuring this board and our public that our current shelter operations and our current services that we're providing in temporary housing and other housing outside of the shelters are meeting the needs of our population, that we're not creating a magnet. So please, let's make sure that all of the data collection that we are doing, all across our entire spectrum of services that we're providing in the housing and homeless area, is addressing that issue first and foremost. Secondly, in terms of the preferred location, and I'm sorry to my friends in the city of Auburn, we do ourselves a disservice if we automatically take the airport area off the table. I know that we do it for certain safety reasons. I sit along with Supervisor Holmes on the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency that also sits as the Airport Land Use Commission. And yes, there are obviously concerns when you start talking about the airport overflight area and all the rest. However, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we just automatically discount the airport area and the opportunities that it provides. I also think we do ourselves a disservice if we are talking about, like the South Placer proposal is evaluating that entire continuum of care. I also think we are doing ourselves a disservice if we take more remote areas off the table, if we take areas that are currently zoned forestry and other things like that off of the table. If we are truly going to have a self-contained continuum of care opportunity for people who truly want to get better and get back into employment and get back into housing permanently, then having them remote with opportunities for transportation from their remote location to job centers for those that are ready and capable, I think is perfectly feasible. And I think it would be far more cost effective to find opportunities in those areas outside of the commercial corridors. So, those are my thoughts.
Supervisor Duran.
Yeah, couple of comments. I believe it was three and a half years ago, Jen, when I was chair of the board, when this issue finally boiled and came to a head.
I think so.
And you know, at that time, I had a lot of people come and tell me, Jack, don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. It's a political bombshell. You know, nothing good can come out of it. You know, by helping the homeless, you're going to upset this group, you're going to upset that group. The cities are going to hate you because you know they want to focus on economic development, this, that, and the other thing. But I'll tell you, you know, in thinking through that and finally allowing this discussion to occur at the Board of Supervisors, you know, I think we've come a long ways from, you know, the myths of what homeless are and what and how to reach them and how to resolve the problem and manage the problem a lot better. You know, back in the 50s, maybe 20 years ago, vouchers were in, a lot of other methods were in, but they just don't work anymore. And I think through what we've done with an excellent Health and Human Services Department, they've come out and they're actually addressing the core issues of homelessness. We've got some great nonprofits that we work with. We're doing a lot of really good stuff here, and I'm really proud to say that Placer County is leading not only the state, but probably the country in what we do. You know, contrary to my neighbor, the POP officers were put in there specifically for the purpose because you asked for them. You came to us and you said, hey, we've got a problem in North Auburn. What did we do? There was a shelter there. There's still ongoing discussion about whether or not the shelter is a magnet or whether it's not a magnet. But we stepped up to the plate and we coughed up $1.2 million a year for the POP officers in the POP officer program to make your lives better, right? And we're going to continue to do that. I think we're headed in the right direction. If we can get the cities on board to come talk to us and help us with the problem, because it's their problem too, I'd have no, I think we can solve this, or manage it a lot better with everybody involved, and I agree. With regards to the Plaster Rescue Mission, as I've said time and time again, it's a concept. There's no permits have been pulled, but I think it's something that is evolving. And just as Brooke had mentioned earlier tonight, that there's a lot of different opportunities with that particular concept. That I think at the end of the day, if whether or not it does come to fruition, it's going to be evolving also. And I think there are opportunities there, big, small, middle-sized. That's up for discussion. And again, our point of interaction with that particular piece is not until permits are pulled by the county. But I'm still willing to talk about my thoughts about what the county has done thus far in relationship to the Plaster Rescue Mission anytime. In general, I think we're headed in the right direction. I don't have a problem looking into alternate and continuing the discussion of looking for an alternate location. I've said time and time again that this is a temporary solution. It seems that we've got our sea legs underneath us now, and now we can turn that into another opportunity, possibly someplace else. But at the end of the day, folks, the fallback position there is that if there's not a willingness to build a new building at the site, in a new site, it's all going to happen at the site that it is now. So we need your help to help site that location if there is going to be one. So those are my comments.
Supervisor Holmes, did you have anything to add? Okay. So my comments on this is I'm certainly willing to consider building a new building on a vacant site. I would prefer, if possible, just looking at the economics of it, to retrofit something. But if that's not feasible, it's not feasible. And when I talk about a vacant site, I'm talking about in Eastern Placer, in Mid Placer, and in South Placer. I think Dr. Marbott's report very clearly demonstrated, and we all signed on to his report when it was in front of us 3 years ago, that there are 3 very distinct populations, and that while there is some movement between them, it's pretty minimal. And so if we are going to serve those distinct populations, we need 3 distinct facilities. We have opportunities in all those locations to partner with cities, with nonprofits, with faith-based groups. In Eastern Placer County, probably the opportunity to partner with the town of Truckee and the county of Nevada, because we really sort of share a geographic region up there that can't be parsed apart. I need to give additional thought, frankly, to whether the shelter and the community criteria are adequate. I know we've discussed it internally, so I'm not really ready to weigh in on that tonight. And in terms of a preferred location, I think there's 3, and it's somewhere in Eastern Placer, somewhere in Mid Placer, and somewhere in South Placer. And, there is not going to be a Goldilocks site in all of those places. There is going to be, as someone said, locations that tick all the boxes, and then, it doesn't tick the box. And so that's when those sites are closer to being identified, and hopefully the community can help us to identify those sites, that's when we start that really deep dive and that deep analysis to say, okay, it meets 90% of the criteria. Are we willing as a board to say the 10%, we're just going to have to live with it? So those are my thoughts on those questions. I wanted to get back to something Betsy said, because I thought it was so important, which was about the POP officers. And please, we're having these successes. Don't let them go away. I will just tell you, it is my intention that they stay, because they are the reason for our success. They and probation and health and human services working together with all of us as partners here in the area are what are helping us to make progress. And I do not want to backslide on any of that. So you have my word that if I have anything to say about it, they will stay. So those are my comments.
Ditto.
Supervisor Euler.
I'm with you on that last comment.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have two other things I did want to add. Given my penchant to ridicule Supervisor Wygant any opportunity he gives me, and he gives me them all the time, I want to correct something you said. You rightly pointed out our partnerships with our nonprofits in Placer County, and you said not that you can take credit for it. Well, the fact of the matter was that in 1996, and you were here in 1996, I know because I was here in 1996, when Gingrich and Clinton got together on welfare reform and decided to block grant it out to the states, and the state of California said to the counties, okay, this money's flowing through to you. How do you guys want to do it? Our board at the time said, we're going to go partner with our existing private nonprofits. And that became the Plaster model that exists to this day. So, Supervisor Wygant, yes, you do get credit for that.
It's your
because
fault.
having been here for going on 7 decades, is that what it is? I don't know. You get the credit and the blame for most things, I think, at this point. But to that point, we have had successful relationships with our nonprofit partners. The continuum of care that we're discussing and this whole person care that we're discussing wouldn't be possible without a partnership with some of our corporate partners, specifically Sutter Health. And so I think we have an opportunity as we move forward to take advantage of their generosity to the greatest extent possible, but also to leverage that generosity in working with other, not just healthcare providers, but when we're talking about housing, and as enough people have talked about here tonight, it's not just the homeless. It's the entire continuum of housing. It's from the homeless to the temporary to the permanent affordable. I think we need to be having this conversation with more of our corporate partners. And I do represent this board on the Greater Sacramento Area Economic Council. And I can tell you that it is more and more of an issue that we are addressing. When we sit there, those of us that represent the 19 different local jurisdictions, their members, we sit there with about 37 of the CEOs of the largest employers in the Sacramento region, and we have conversations about things like this. So I think if we start to show some success, there's nothing that corporations want to be a part of if it doesn't have defined, measurable objectives. And so if we are able to define those measurable objectives and start to show some success, we will get the assistance of our corporate partners in meeting those needs across that housing spectrum. I'm confident of it. They've done a great job of stepping up so far on economic development here in the region. And so I think we have a real opportunity to take advantage of what our HHS folks are already doing, working with Sutter, working with our private nonprofits, and continuing this. So that's all I wanted to add.
And I am going to give Supervisor Euler the final word. Thank you all for attending tonight. Thank you for your comments. We really appreciate your commitment to participating in this process. And at that, we stand adjourned.
We're going to get to the San Francisco.
Yeah, no, I got plenty of time.